Story 1. I used to work the night shift at a gas station off a seldom-used interstate. The kind of place where every customer was a familiar face, and strangers were as rare as a cool breeze in the dead of summer. One night, during a particularly slow and sticky July evening, a man walked in just past midnight. He was average in every way possible, not too tall, not too short, with a forgettable face hidden under the brim of a worn-out baseball cap. He browsed the aisles in silence, his footsteps echoing softly against the linoleum floor. Something about him set my nerves on edge, a feeling I couldn't shake as I watched him from behind the counter. He eventually picked up a bottle of water and approached to pay. His eyes, a cold and piercing blue, met mine for the first time as he handed over a crumpled bill. His gaze lingered just a moment too long, sending an involuntary shudder through me. After he left, the air felt heavier, charged with a silent foreboding. I tried to shake off the unease, telling myself I was just spooked by a lonely night and an overly active imagination. But as the hours crept by, I couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. It was near the end of my shift, the first light of dawn just starting to bleed into the dark sky, when I heard it. A soft, deliberate tapping on the window near the door. My heart raced as I looked up, expecting to see a customer, maybe even a lost traveler seeking directions. But there was only him, the man from earlier, standing outside, staring in with those ice-cold eyes. He wasn't tapping with his fingers, it was the same bottle of water he had bought, now empty, tapping against the glass in a slow, rhythmic pattern. Panic seized me. The phone was just out of reach, but calling the police seemed an overreaction. He hadn't done anything, after all. Yet the primal part of my brain screamed danger. I decided to confront him, to tell him we were closed and he needed to leave. As I approached the door, however, he simply turned and walked into the darkness, disappearing as quietly as he had appeared. I never saw him again, but the incident left a mark on me. I quit the night shift soon after, unable to shake the fear that one night, the tapping on the window wouldn't just be a warning. In the light of day, people laugh off the story, telling me it was just a guy messing with me, or maybe someone a little off his rocker. But in the depth of night, when I'm alone and the world is silent, I can't convince myself that there wasn't something more sinister lurking behind those eyes. The kind of real horror that doesn't need to be supernatural to terrify you. The days following the incident blended into one another, each shift a mirror of the last, except for the gnawing unease that settled deep in my bones. The monotony of my job was now punctured by jumps at shadows and double checks of a locked door. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the man was just a passing stranger, but the memory of his gaze haunted me, unyielding and omnipresent. One evening, a regular Mrs. Henderson came in for her usual pack of cigarettes. She noticed my distracted demeanor, and after a little prodding, I found myself spilling the story to her. She listened, her expression shifting from concern to fear. "Dear," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "you did well to stay inside. There's people out there who do things, bad things, for reasons we can't begin to understand." Her words were meant to comfort, but they only served to fan the flames of my fear. Weeks turned to months, and the man became a ghost in my memory, a specter of what I hoped was just an isolated incident of fear. That was until one night, when the news flashed a story that sent me spiraling. A series of break-ins had occurred in the area, each with the perpetrator leaving behind an empty bottle, a calling card of sorts. The description of the suspect made my blood run cold. It was him, the man from that night. The realization hit me like a freight train. The danger had been real, palpable and lurking just outside my door. The next day, I handed in my resignation. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of being hunted, by someone who found pleasure in the terror of others. I moved away not long after, trying to leave behind the shadows that had crept into my life. But sometimes, in the stillness of night, I find myself listening for the soft tapping on the window, a reminder of the night that changed everything. Story 2. Our neighbor, Mr. Thompson was the epitome of mundane. A retired postman, he spent his days tending to his garden and his evenings watching television in his dimly lit living room. No one paid him much mind, he was just another fixture of our daily lives. But then, the neighborhood pets started disappearing. First, it was a cat here, a dog there. Whispers of a coyote or a stray dog circulated, easing the minds of the concerned pet owners. However, the truth was far more sinister. It was a balmy summer evening when I discovered the horrifying reality. Drawn by the curiosity that plagues the young, I found myself peering over Mr. Thompson's fence. What I saw in the dim glow of his backyard light was a tableau of horror. The missing pets, or what was left of them, were scattered across his lawn, part of some grotesque collection. Mr. Thompson stood among them, a figure so alien from the neighbor I thought I knew. The police were called and Mr. Thompson was arrested, his secret laid bare for all to see. But the damage was done. The neighborhood was never the same, its sense of security shattered by the knowledge of the monster who had lived among us. It taught me a chilling lesson: true horror isn't found in the supernatural, but in the capabilities of the ordinary, in the darkness that lurks within. The aftermath of Mr. Thompson's arrest rippled through our community like a stone cast into still water. Parents tightened their grip on their children. Suspicious eyes followed anyone who walked alone at night, and the once friendly greetings shared between neighbors became curt nods. My own family was shaken to the core, grappling with the proximity of such darkness. Dinner conversations turned into discussions about safety and trust. The innocence of our neighborhood had been stripped away, revealing a world much darker than any of us were prepared to acknowledge. In the weeks that followed, I became obsessed with understanding why. Why would someone who seemed so ordinary, so benign, harbor such malice? I pored over news articles and police reports, each detail etching a deeper mark of horror into my psyche. It was a futile search for answers. There was no satisfaction, no closure to be found in the motivations of a man who could betray humanity in such a grotesque manner. The questions haunted me, following me into adulthood. They shaped my worldview, instilling a wariness of the masks people wear in daily life. The realization that the face of evil could so easily resemble that of a friend or a neighbor was a bitter pill to swallow. It taught me to look deeper, to question the surface calm that's so many present to the world. Years later, the story of Mr. Thompson and the hidden darkness within our seemingly idyllic neighborhood remains a cautionary tale. It's a reminder of the complex nature of humans, of the depths of depravity that can exist behind closed doors. The experience sculpted my understanding of horror, grounding it not in the ethereal or supernatural, but in the reality of human capability. True terror, I learned, lies not in the unknown, but in the familiar turned monstrous, in the betrayal of trust, and in the loss of innocence in the face of unspeakable acts. In the end, the greatest horror stories are those that unfold around us, whispered in hushed tones across backyard fences, echoing through the halls of our own homes. They're the stories that remind us of the thin veneer of civility that separates society from savagery, the stories that compel us to look beneath the surface and to confront the darkness within. The legacy of what happened in our neighborhood served as a grim reminder of the fragility of security and trust. It underscored an unsettling truth that the monsters we're taught to fear in childhood stories don't live under our beds or lurk in shadowy forests. Instead, they reside much closer to home, sometimes just a fence away, masquerading as ordinary people leading ordinary lives. This realization forced me to grow up faster than I should have, instilling a cautiousness that bordered on cynicism. Yet, it wasn't all bleak. In the wake of the darkness, our community found a new strength. We learned the importance of unity and vigilance, of looking out for one another. Block parties turned into neighborhood watch meetings, and suspicion gave way to a collective effort to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. The tragedy of Mr. Thompson's crimes didn't just expose the horrors capable by one man, it also highlighted the resilience of a community determined not to be defined by them. Story 3. I was 22 years old, fresh out of college and full of ambition, when I decided to embark on a cross-country road trip. It was a journey meant to celebrate my newfound freedom and to quench my thirst for adventure. With my car packed and my spirits high, I set off into the great unknown, eager for the experiences that awaited me. The first few days were exhilarating. I watched the landscape change from the dense forests of the east to the sprawling plains of the Midwest. I met fellow travelers, each with their own stories and destinations, and for a while I felt invincible, untouched by the world's darker realities. It was on the fourth night, in a small, nondescript town, that everything changed. I had checked into a modest motel, one of those places that seemed frozen in time, promising nothing more than a bed and a roof for the night. The clerk was a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a forced smile. She handed me the key to room 8, advising me to park my car in front of my room for safety. I thanked her, naive to the weight of her words. After a quick dinner at the diner across the street, I returned to my room. It was exactly what I expected: dated furniture, a flickering lamp, and a sense of transient anonymity. Exhaustion soon took over, and I fell into a deep sleep, unaware of the eyes that watched from the darkness. I awoke to a soft sound, a barely perceptible scraping that seemed to come from the door. Groggy and disoriented, I first thought it was a product of my imagination, a remnant of a dream. But as my senses sharpened, the noise became unmistakable. Someone was trying to pick the lock. Panic seized me, a visceral, choking terror that rendered me momentarily immobile. My first instinct was to shout, to make noise, anything that might deter the intruder. But fear clamped down on my voice, squeezing the air from my lungs. Instead, I rolled out of bed, moving as silently as I could, and crept towards the door. The scraping continued, persistent and focused. I remembered the clerk's advice about parking in front of my room, a precaution that now seemed ominously prescient. I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling so badly I almost dropped it. Dialing 911, I whispered my situation and location to the operator, who assured me that help was on the way. The wait for the police was agonizing, each second stretching into an eternity as the scraping at the door persisted. Then, abruptly, it stopped. The silence that followed was almost worse, a suffocating anticipation of what might come next. Suddenly, headlights flooded the room through the curtains, and the sound of a car door slamming jolted me. Peering through the window, I saw a police cruiser, relief flooding through me so intensely it left me weak. The officers found a man lurking near the ice machine, carrying a set of lock-picking tools and a knife. He was arrested, but the incident left a scar on my psyche that no amount of time could fully heal. The remainder of my trip was overshadowed by the event. The landscapes I had once viewed with wonder now seemed to hide potential threats, and the strangers I met were no longer characters in my adventure, but possible dangers. The world had shifted, and with it, my place within it. I returned home with a deeper understanding of vulnerability, a sense of caution that had been absent before. The adventure had been life-changing, but not in the ways I had hoped. It taught me that horror doesn't always come in the form of monsters or ghosts, but sometimes in the very real presence of another human being, with intentions dark and unfathomable. Story 4. The apartment was on the 3rd floor, overlooking a small, well-kept courtyard. The previous tenant had left behind a collection of plants on the balcony, which I tended to with care, finding solace in the simple act of nurturing life. My neighbors were a diverse group, from young professionals to elderly couples, all of whom welcomed me with open arms. It was everything I had hoped for, a perfect place to rebuild and find myself again. But peace, it seems, is a fragile thing. It wasn't long before I noticed the signs. Small at first, easily dismissed as the quirks of an old building, a flickering light in the hallway, a cold draft in the absence of an open window. I laughed off these oddities, attributing them to the building's age and my overactive imagination. However, as the days passed, the disturbances became harder to ignore. Objects in my apartment began to move, ever so slightly, from where I had left them. A book on the coffee table would find its way to the floor. A vase shifted inches from its spot on the shelf. I searched for logical explanations, questioning my own memory and sanity. But the culmination of these events came one night, as I lay in bed, drifting towards sleep. The sound of footsteps echoed through the apartment, deliberate and heavy. My heart froze. I was alone. The doors locked, the windows sealed against the November chill. Rising from my bed, I moved towards the living room, the sound of footsteps growing louder, closer. What I saw there, in the dim moonlight that filtered through the curtains, would forever alter the course of my life. The living room was empty, yet the air was charged with an electric tension, as if charged with unseen currents. My eyes darted around, searching for the source of the footsteps, but there was nothing. The sound had ceased as abruptly as it had begun, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. I stood there, in the middle of the room, my heart pounding, my mind racing to make sense of the impossible. I was alone, unequivocally alone, yet the undeniable sensation of being watched crept over me, sending shivers down my spine. In the days that followed, the occurrences escalated. Doors would slam shut without a breeze, whispers filled the air, devoid of a source, and shadows flitted just at the edge of my vision. The apartment, once a haven of tranquility, had become a prison of unseen terror. I reached out to my neighbors, inquiring if they had experienced anything similar, hoping for a logical explanation. Their responses varied from polite skepticism to uneasy glances that spoke volumes of unshared fears. One neighbor, an elderly woman who had lived in the building for decades, hesitated before speaking. Her voice, when she finally found it, was a whisper. "You're not the first." She recounted tales of the previous tenants, each story ending with hasty departures and whispered rumors of a curse. Skepticism battled with the raw edge of my experiences, leaving me torn between disbelief and dread. The rational part of my brain screamed for logical explanations, yet the primal, instinctual part of me recoiled from the undeniable truth that something beyond my understanding was at play. Determined to reclaim my sanctuary, I delved into the history of the building, searching for answers. The deeper I dug, the darker the stories became. Tales of tragedy and loss, of lives cut short by sorrow, painted a history marred by despair. The building, it seemed, was a magnet for misfortune, its walls steeped in the echoes of the past. My apartment, the epicenter of the disturbances, had once been the home of a young artist whose life had ended in tragedy, a story of love lost, and a descent into madness that culminated in a final, desperate act. Armed with this knowledge, I sought to cleanse the apartment of its sorrowful past. I invited a local priest to bless the home, and I filled the space with symbols of hope and renewal. Gradually, the atmosphere lightened, the disturbances growing less frequent until they ceased altogether. The shadows receded, the whispers faded into silence, and peace was restored. The experience left me with a profound respect for the unseen forces that shape our lives, a reminder of the thin veil that separates the world of the living from the echoes of the past. In the end, the apartment became my sanctuary once more, a place of peace and reflection. But the journey there was a reminder that sometimes the true horror lies not in the presence of malevolent spirits, but in the echoes of human pain and the unseen scars that history leaves upon a place. Story 5. It was the allure of isolation that drew me to the town, a place where the sea met the sky in an endless dance of waves and wind. I had rented a small cottage on the outskirts, a quaint structure overlooking the rugged coastline. It was the perfect backdrop for a writer, a place where imagination could soar, unfettered by the distractions of the modern world. The town's residents were few, a tight-knit community bound by generations of life by the sea. They welcomed me with open arms, sharing tales of the town's history, of ships lost to the merciless ocean, and of the resilient spirit of those who called the town home. My days were spent in solitude, writing, with the rhythmic crash of waves as my constant companion. It was a peaceful existence, one that I had longed for. Yet, as the days turned to weeks, I began to notice a shift in the atmosphere. The town, so welcoming by day, seemed to take on a different character as dusk fell. Shadows stretched long across the empty streets, and the wind carried whispers of voices long silenced by the sea. Curiosity piqued. I began to explore the town's history, delving into the archives at the local library. What I uncovered was a tapestry of tragedy and mystery, stories of ships that vanished without a trace, of lives swallowed by the unforgiving ocean. Among these tales, one stood out: a legend of a ship, the Siren's Call, which had disappeared over a century ago, its fate a mystery that had confounded generations. The legend of the Siren's Call had become something of a local lore, its story woven into the fabric of the town's identity. The ship, captained by a man whose name had been lost to time, was said to have vanished one stormy night, taken by the sea without a trace. Some said it was the victim of a fierce tempest, others whispered of a curse, and still others spoke of the siren's song, a melody so hauntingly beautiful that it lured sailors to their doom. Intrigued by the mystery, I decided to dedicate my next piece to unraveling the story of the Siren's Call. My inquiries led me to the descendants of the town's founding families, each of whom held a piece of the puzzle. Through their stories, a picture began to emerge, not just of a ship lost to the sea, but of a community forever marked by its disappearance. The captain, it was said, had been a proud and stubborn man, determined to conquer the sea. His crew, a mix of seasoned sailors and young lads eager for adventure, had followed him out of loyalty and the promise of treasure. The night they set sail, the sea had been calm, the stars bright guides in the sky. But as they ventured further from shore, a fog descended, thick and impenetrable, and with it came the song. It was a melody that spoke of longing and despair, a call to the soul that was impossible to resist. The last sighting of the Siren's Call was by an old fisherman who spoke of seeing the ship veer off course, heading straight for the treacherous rocks that lurked beneath the waves. He claimed to have heard the song, a melody that chilled him to the bone, even from the safety of his boat. The next morning the ship was gone, and with it all hands on board. The town mourned its loss, a wound that never fully healed, the mystery of their fate a specter that lingered. As I delved deeper into the legend, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, a secret that had been buried beneath years of grief and speculation. My search led me to an old, weather-beaten journal in the attic of the town's historical society, a first-hand account by a young boy who had stowed away on the Siren's Call, seeking adventure and finding horror instead. The journal detailed the journey, from the initial excitement of setting sail to the growing unease as the fog rolled in. It spoke of the song, a melody that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the ocean, and of the crew's descent into madness as they were drawn to it. But it was the final entry that held the key to the mystery. The boy wrote of a hidden cove, a place not marked on any map, where the ship had run aground. He spoke of an ancient shrine half buried in the sand, and of a decision made in desperation to appease the sea. Armed with this new information, I set out to find the cove, a journey that took me to the furthest edges of the coastline. It was there, hidden from view by sheer cliffs and treacherous tides, that I found it. The remains of the Siren's Call, battered by time and the elements, lay scattered across the sand, a ghostly testament to its fate. As I stood there, amidst the wreckage, I realized that the legend of the Siren's Call was not just a tale of loss and mystery, but of sacrifice and redemption. The crew, led by their captain, had offered their ship to the sea, a plea for mercy to the forces that they had dared to challenge. In return, the sea had spared the boy, allowing him to return to shore with the story of their fate. The mystery of the siren's call was solved, but in its place, a new legend was born, one of human courage in the unfathomable depths of the sea's mercy. It was a story that spoke to the heart of the town, a reminder of the bond between land and sea, and of the respect owed to the forces that shape our world. As I shared my findings with the town, I watched as the old wounds began to heal, the story of the siren's call no longer a tale of sorrow, but a legend of hope and perseverance. The town embraced its past, celebrating the bravery of those who had set sail into the unknown, and in doing so, found a new sense of unity and purpose. Story 6. The forest of Eldritch had always been a boundary between the worlds of man and myth. Legends whispered of creatures that dwelled within, guardians of ancient secrets and treasures untold. I, a writer with a thirst for the unknown, ventured into this enigmatic wilderness, seeking inspiration for my next novel. My journey began at the edge of the village of Thornwood, where the forest loomed like a wall of shadows, its canopy obscuring the sky above. The villagers spoke of the forest with a mixture of fear and reverence. They told tales of the fae, of spirits and beasts that could beguile or terrorize an unwary traveler. But one legend stood out, the tale of the Heart of Eldritch, a gem of unparalleled beauty said to hold the power of the forest itself. It was this legend that drew me in, a siren call to my curious soul. Armed with a map, a notebook, and a compass, I set foot into the forest. The path was overgrown, nature reclaiming what was once hers, but it was still discernible. The air was thick with the scent of moss and earth, the silence broken only by the distant call of birds and the rustle of leaves underfoot. I felt as though I was stepping through the veil of time, into a world untouched by man. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the forest took on a different character. Shadows lengthened, and the sounds of the night began to emerge. It was then that I realized the forest was alive in a way I had never imagined. I could feel it watching me, ancient and knowing. The first night I camped near a stream, its water clear and cold. That night, I dreamt of the Heart of Eldritch. It called to me from the depths of the forest, its voice like the wind through the trees. When I awoke, I felt an inexplicable pull towards the heart of the forest, as if the dream had awakened a yearning within me. Days passed as I journeyed deeper into Eldritch. The forest revealed its wonders to me, a deer with eyes like the night sky, flowers that glowed with an ethereal light, and trees that whispered secrets in a language I felt I almost understood. But with the beauty came danger. Thorns that could pierce through the strongest boots, plants that enticed with their scent only to reveal poisonous barbs, and shadows that moved of their own accord. One evening, as twilight encroached upon the forest, I found myself in a clearing. At its center stood an ancient oak, its branches reaching towards the sky like the fingers of a giant. Beneath it lay a pool of water, perfectly still, reflecting the first stars of the evening. It was here, the villagers had said, that the boundary between worlds was thinnest, where one could slip from the realm of man into the domain of the fae. As I approached the pool, the air grew colder, the sounds of the forest receding until there was nothing but silence. I looked into the water and saw, not my reflection, but a vision of the forest, vibrant and teeming with life. And then from the corner of my eye I saw a flicker of movement, a shadow that was not cast by any tree. I turned, coming face to face with a creature from the realms of fairy tales. It stood on two legs, its form lithe and covered in fur the color of the night. Its eyes glowed with an inner light, and its gaze pierced through me, reading my soul. We stood there, in the clearing, two beings from different worlds, connected by the ancient magic of Eldritch. The creature spoke, its voice a melody that resonated with the very essence of the forest. It spoke of the heart of Eldritch, of its power to connect all life within the forest, and of the danger it faced. There were those who sought the heart for their own gain, who would tear the forest apart to claim it. The creature asked for my help to find the heart and protect it, to preserve the balance of the forest. Compelled by the creature's plea, I agreed. What followed was a journey that tested my limits, physically and spiritually. I faced trials that pushed me to the brink of despair, encountered beings of light and darkness, and uncovered truths about myself I had never dared to confront. The heart of Eldritch was more than a gem, it was the soul of the forest, a nexus of life and magic. The climax of my quest took place under the light of a full moon, in a grove where the trees themselves seemed to breathe. It was here that the heart lay hidden, and it was here that I confronted those who would destroy Eldritch for their own ends. The battle was fierce, a clash of wills and magic, but in the end, the heart was secured, and the forest saved. My return to the village was met with disbelief and awe. I had ventured into the heart of Eldritch and returned, changed in ways I could not fully explain. I had seen the true face of the forest, both its beauty and its peril, and I had played a part in its preservation. The story of my journey became the basis for my novel, a tale of adventure, magic, and the deep, unbreakable connections between all living things. But more than that, it was a testament to the power of belief, to the courage to step into the unknown and embrace the mysteries that lie beyond the boundaries of our world. Eldritch taught me that there are wonders in this world that defy explanation, that the lines between myth and reality are often blurred, and sometimes the greatest stories are the ones that we live, the ones that transform us in ways we could never imagine. Story 7. Beneath the veneer of a bustling city lies a forgotten underground network of tunnels, remnants of a bygone era. It was within this shadowy labyrinth that my story unfolded, a tale of discovery, danger, and the unyielding pursuit of truth. As a freelance journalist, my life was a constant search for the next big story, the kind that could change the course of careers, or better yet, lives. That's when I stumbled upon a series of old city records, buried deep within the archives. They spoke of a network of tunnels constructed in the early 20th century, now lost to time and memory. The allure was irresistible. I saw it not just as a story, but as an adventure, a chance to peel back the layers of the city's past. My investigation led me to Eli, a seasoned urban explorer known for his knowledge of the city's hidden underbelly. He was a relic himself, a man whose eyes held stories untold. Reluctantly, he agreed to guide me through the tunnels, warning of the risks. "These tunnels aren't just forgotten by the city, they're shunned," he said, his voice a low rumble. "People have gone down and never come back." Undeterred, we set off one cold autumn night. The entrance was through an old, abandoned subway station, its once grand features now succumbing to decay. As we descended, the city's sounds faded, replaced by the echo of our footsteps and the distant drip of water. The air grew colder, the darkness more oppressive. Eli led the way, his flashlight cutting through the black. The tunnels were a maze, a network that stretched beneath the city like the roots of an ancient tree. We passed by old construction equipment, left to rust, and rooms that served purposes long forgotten. Graffiti adorned the walls, some recent, others old enough to be considered artifacts themselves. It was in one such chamber, vast and echoing, that we found a car, half buried in rubble, its origin a mystery. Eli examined it, his brow furrowed. "This shouldn't be here," he muttered. "There's no way a car could have gotten into the tunnels, not through any entrance I know." The mystery deepened as we explored further. We found personal belongings scattered around the room, as if someone had been living there, or perhaps hiding. Among the items was a journal, its pages yellowed with age. The entries were cryptic. speaking of secrets and conspiracies, of something hidden deep within the tunnels that was of great value or great danger. Our curiosity turned to apprehension as we delved deeper, driven by the need to uncover the truth. The tunnels seemed to close in around us, the air thick with the weight of secrets. It was then that we heard a sound, distant at first but growing closer. Footsteps, not our own, echoed through the tunnels, a reminder that we were not alone. We pressed on, the journal our only clue, its entries becoming more frantic as the date of the last entry approached. The writer spoke of being followed, of threats made against their life. They hinted at a discovery, something so significant that it could alter the city's history, something that others were desperate to keep hidden. The final entry was a plea, a warning to whoever found the journal to continue the search, to bring the truth to light. It was signed with a name I recognized, a journalist who had vanished without a trace years ago, their disappearance a cold case that had long since faded from the public's eye. Eli and I realized the gravity of our discovery. We were on the brink of uncovering a secret that had claimed lives, a story that was more than we had bargained for. Our journey through the tunnels became a race against an unseen enemy, a shadow that seemed always just a step behind. In the heart of the labyrinth, we found what had been hidden, a room, sealed away behind a false wall. Inside, evidence of a government experiment gone awry, records of a project that had been buried in the depths of the city, both literally and metaphorically. The implications were staggering, a scandal that reached the highest levels of power. But with the discovery came danger. We were not the only ones interested in the secrets of the tunnels. As we attempted to leave, we found our path blocked, our presence no longer a secret. What followed was a tense game of cat and mouse, a desperate attempt to escape the darkness and bring the truth into the light. Our escape was narrow, fraught with peril, but we emerged from the tunnels changed. The story we had uncovered was more than a career-defining moment. It was a testament to the pursuit of truth, no matter the cost. The evidence we brought back sparked investigations, leading to revelations that shook the city to its core. The tunnels, once forgotten, became a symbol of the hidden truths that lie beneath the surface, a reminder that sometimes the greatest stories are buried, waiting for the brave or the foolish to uncover them. Story 8. In the sprawling suburbs of a city that prided itself on normalcy and uneventful days, there lay a house that defied every unwritten rule of architectural conformity. This was the Mannerly Estate, a relic from an era long past, standing proudly amidst cookie-cutter homes like a stubborn old man refusing to acknowledge the passage of time. In its walls, once a vibrant shade of red, now bore the muted tones of neglect, and its garden, once meticulously curated, had grown wild with disregard. Yet, it was not the estate's dilapidated state that drew hushed whispers from the community, but rather its mysterious occupant and the tales that surrounded them. I was a freelance writer, always on the hunt for stories that lay hidden in the mundane crevices of life, waiting to be unearthed. The Mannerly Estate, with its aura of mystery and whispers of ghosts, seemed like a story begging to be told. My curiosity piqued. I decided to delve into the history of the estate and its enigmatic resident. The town's archives, a collection of dust and forgotten histories, held the first piece of the puzzle. The Mannerly Estate was built in the late 1800s by a prosperous merchant, Edward Mannerly, a man known for his eccentricities and reclusive nature. The house was a testament to his wealth and taste for the extravagant. However, tragedy struck soon after its completion, with the untimely death of Mannerly's wife, which plunged him into a deep melancholy. Rumors swirled of how the once lively halls of the estate grew silent, and Edward Mannerly was seldom seen in public again. Decades turned to centuries, and the estate passed through various heirs, each leaving their mark on its history. Yet the aura of tragedy and mystery remained, culminating in its current occupant, a descendant of Edward Mannerly, who, according to town gossip, had inherited not just the estate but the reclusive tendencies and eccentricities of its original owner. Armed with this knowledge, I approached the estate on a crisp autumn afternoon, the fallen leaves crunching underfoot. My knock on the heavy oak door echoed unanswered, adding to the sense of foreboding that had begun to settle over me. Just as I turned to leave, the door creaked open, revealing a figure that seemed as much a part of the house as the walls themselves. The current Mr. Mannerly, a man of indeterminate age, with sharp eyes that missed nothing, invited me in with a courtesy that seemed from another age. The interior of the house was a paradox, with rooms that whispered of the past's grandeur amidst the decay of neglect. As Mr. Mannerly guided me through the halls, he spoke of the house and its history, of the weight of legacy and the solitude it imposed. But it was the library, a room that seemed untouched by time, where the heart of the story lay. Here, amongst the musty tomes and faded maps, Mr. Mannerly revealed the true mystery of the Mannerly estate. It was not a tale of ghosts or curses, but of a secret society that had been founded by Edward Mannerly himself, dedicated to the preservation of knowledge that was deemed too dangerous or too powerful for the world at large. As Mr. Mannerly spoke, the pieces began to fall into place. The reclusiveness of the Mannerly line, the rumors of eccentricities, were all a facade, a cover for the activities of the society that continued to operate in the shadows of the modern world. The Mannerly estate was not just a home, it was a vault, a guardian of secrets that had shaped the course of history in ways I could barely comprehend. The story I had set out to write had morphed into something far greater than a tale of a haunted house. It was a glimpse into a hidden world that existed parallel to our own, where the legacy of a family was intertwined with the fate of the world. As I left the Mannerly estate, the sun setting behind the ancient walls, I knew that the story I would write would barely scratch the surface of the truth. The real story lay in the silent guardianship of the Mannerly line, in the secrets that were preserved within the walls of the estate, and in the realization that sometimes the greatest mysteries are hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. Story 9. In a quiet coastal town, where the sea whispered secrets to those who would listen, lived a lighthouse keeper named Thomas. He was a man of routine, devoted to the solitary life that came with his duty. The lighthouse, an ancient structure that had stood guard over the rocky shores for centuries, was more than just a home to Thomas. It was his companion, his responsibility, and his life's calling. Thomas' days were marked by the rhythmic rotation of the lighthouse beam, cutting through the fog and darkness to guide sailors safely home. It was a noble, if lonely, existence, but one that Thomas cherished. However, the tranquility of his life was shattered one stormy night when a knock at the door echoed through the lighthouse like a harbinger of change. Upon opening the door, Thomas found a young woman, drenched and shivering, her eyes wide with fear. She introduced herself as Eliza, a marine biologist who had been studying the migration patterns of sea creatures in the area. Her boat had capsized in the storm, and by some miracle she had managed to swim to the shore, finding refuge at the lighthouse's door. Thomas welcomed her in, providing warmth and shelter from the relentless storm. As the night progressed, Eliza shared tales of her research, of the mysteries hidden beneath the waves, and of a legend that had captured her imagination, the tale of the Siren's Heart, a gem of unparalleled beauty and power, said to rest in the deepest trench off the coast. According to legend, the Siren's Heart had the power to command the sea, to calm the stormiest waters, and to summon the creatures of the deep. It was a treasure that had fascinated Eliza, driving her to seek its truth beneath the layers of myth. Moved by her passion and stirred by a curiosity he hadn't known he possessed, Thomas found himself drawn into Eliza's quest. Together they began to piece together the clues to the siren's heart, delving into ancient maritime logs, deciphering maps, and following the stars as the old sailors did. Their search led them to discoveries both wonderful and dangerous, revealing secrets about the sea that Thomas, despite his years by the water, had never imagined. They encountered creatures of beauty and terror, navigated through treacherous waters, and faced challenges that tested their resolve and their growing bond. But as they drew closer to uncovering the truth of the siren's heart, they also uncovered a darker side to the legend. The gem, it seemed, was guarded by a creature of the deep, a being that was part siren, part sea serpent, a guardian appointed by the ocean itself to protect the heart from those who would misuse its power. Undeterred, Thomas and Eliza pressed on, their journey bringing them to the very edge of the abyss, to a place where the sea touched the sky and the fabric of reality seemed to thin. It was here, in the heart of the ocean's embrace, that they faced their final test. The guardian of the siren's heart emerged from the depths, a creature of otherworldly beauty and fearsome power. It spoke not with words but with the voice of the sea, its song weaving around Thomas and Eliza, filling them with visions of the ocean's past, present, and possible futures. They saw the beauty of the sea in harmony, the destruction wrought by its fury, and the delicate balance that held the two in check. The Guardian's test was one of understanding and respect, a challenge to prove their intentions pure and their hearts true. With courage and sincerity, Thomas and Eliza conveyed their respect for the sea and its mysteries, pledging to protect the siren's heart from those who would exploit its power. Moved by their resolve, the Guardian bestowed upon them a gift, not the siren's heart itself, but a shard of its essence, a token of the sea's power and a reminder of their responsibility to safeguard its mysteries. Their return to the lighthouse marked the end of one journey and the beginning of another. Together, Thomas and Eliza dedicated themselves to protecting the sea, using the knowledge and insights gained from their adventure to advocate for its preservation and to teach others of its wonders and perils. The lighthouse, once a solitary beacon in the night, became a symbol of hope and stewardship, a place where the mysteries of the sea were honored and its stories shared. Thomas and Eliza's tale, a testament to the power of curiosity, courage, and love, was whispered by the waves, carried by the wind, and etched into the heart of the town, a reminder that the greatest treasures are often found not in the seeking, but in the journey itself. Story 10. In the heart of an ancient forest, where the trees were so tall they seemed to touch the sky, there was a hidden glade known only to the woodland creatures and the rare, adventurous soul. In this glade stood a statue, ancient and moss-covered, depicting a figure with both human and animal features, suggesting a deity of the forest itself. This was the guardian of the glade, a legend passed down through generations of the small, nearby village. Mila, an aspiring writer with a love for the unknown and the mystical, stumbled upon this legend while researching for her next book. Intrigued by the idea of a guardian watching over the forest, she decided to venture into the woods to find the glade and the statue herself, hoping to draw inspiration for her story. Equipped with her notebook, a camera, and a compass, Mila set off at dawn, guided by the vague directions given by the village elders. The forest welcomed her with a symphony of sounds, the light filtering through the dense canopy, creating patterns on the forest floor. As she ventured deeper, the modern world seemed to fall away, leaving only the ancient, untamed beauty of nature. After hours of wandering, Mila finally found the glade. It was as if she had stepped into another world. The air was filled with a palpable sense of magic, and in the center, the statue stood as promised, its details obscured by time and nature, yet possessing an undeniable presence. As Mila approached the statue to examine it more closely, she was startled by the sudden appearance of a fox. It was no ordinary fox, though its fur shimmered with an ethereal light. and its eyes held a wisdom that seemed beyond the natural world. The fox circled her, then sat by the statue, as if guarding it. Mila felt an inexplicable connection to the creature, and as she sat down beside it, she felt a calmness envelop her. The forest around them seemed to hush, as if waiting for something momentous to happen. It was then that the fox spoke to her, not in words, but in images and emotions, conveying the story of the guardian of the glade. The guardian had once been a protector of the forest, a bridge between the human and natural worlds. But as time passed and the world outside changed, fewer and fewer remembered the guardian or the sacredness of the forest. The fox, a spirit of the forest, now watched over the glade, keeping the memory of the guardian alive. Mila was enthralled. This was the story she had been seeking, a tale of magic, forgotten history, and the deep, unbreakable connection between nature and humanity. She realized that her book could not only entertain but also remind her readers of the importance of preserving the natural world and respecting its guardians, seen and unseen. Over the next few days, Mila returned to the glade, each visit revealing more of the forest's secrets through the fox's guidance. She learned of the ancient rituals performed in the glade, of the harmony that once existed between all living things, and of the guardian's sorrow at the fading of this connection. Inspired, Mila began to write her story, intertwining the legend of the guardian of the glade with a narrative that echoed the current struggles of the natural world. She described the beauty of the glade, the wisdom of the fox, and the deep sense of peace she felt in the heart of the forest. Her words painted a vivid picture of a world where magic and nature coexisted, inviting her readers to imagine a better relationship with the world around them. As her story neared completion, Mila knew that her journey had changed her. She was no longer just a writer seeking a tale, she had become a part of the legend, a new guardian of the story that needed to be told. Her book, once published, touched the hearts of many, awakening a newfound appreciation for the mysteries and beauty of the natural world. Mila's story became a catalyst for change, inspiring conservation efforts and a renewed interest in the legends and lore of the natural world. The guardian of the glade, once a forgotten statue in a hidden glade, became a symbol of the enduring bond between humanity and nature, a reminder of the responsibilities that come with this relationship. And as for Mila, she continued to visit the glade, each trip deepening her understanding and connection to the forest. She became a true storyteller, one who used her words to bridge worlds, to protect and preserve the magic that still existed in hidden corners of the world. Story 11. The air was thick with the scent of impending rain as Eleanor stood at the edge of the crumbling sea cliff, looking out over the churning gray waters below. She had come to the small, coastal town of Waverly under peculiar circumstances, a letter from an ancestor long past, beckoning her to inherit a legacy she knew nothing about. Eleanor, a historian with a penchant for uncovering the secrets of the past, found the letter hidden within an ancient family journal. The message was cryptic, mentioning only Waverly's legacy and a key to the past that awaited her in this distant town. Driven by curiosity and the thrill of a mystery, she set out to discover the truth behind the letter. Upon arriving in Waverly, Eleanor was greeted by a town that time seemed to have forgotten. The buildings were weathered by the sea air, and the streets whispered tales of yesteryears. Her inquiries about the legacy mentioned in the letter were met with evasive glances and hushed tones, as if the town itself harbored a secret it dared not reveal. Determined to uncover the truth, Eleanor explored the town, each step drawing her deeper into a web of mystery and intrigue. Her search led her to the local library, a decrepit structure that housed records dating back centuries. There, amidst ancient texts and faded maps, she found the first clue, a mention of the Waverly family, prominent figures in the town's history, who were said to have discovered something of great value. a secret that had been protected through generations. With the help of a reticent librarian, Eleanor unearthed the tale of the Waverly Treasure, a legendary artifact rumored to possess the power to change the course of history. The treasure, however, was lost, its whereabouts unknown since the tragic demise of the last Waverly heir in a storm at sea. Eleanor's research uncovered a series of clues left behind by the Waverly ancestors, each designed to lead a worthy descendant to the treasure. Realizing that she was potentially the key to unlocking this mystery, Eleanor embarked on a quest that took her from the depths of the library's archives to the rugged cliffs and hidden caves along the coastline. As she pieced together the puzzle, Eleanor discovered that the Waverly Treasure was not just a physical artifact but a legacy of knowledge and power that had been safeguarded for centuries. The clues led her to a hidden chamber beneath the old Waverly estate, accessible only when the tide receded, revealing a path long concealed by the sea. Inside the chamber, Eleanor found the treasure, a collection of ancient manuscripts and artifacts that told the history of Waverly and its connection to pivotal moments in time. But more importantly, it held the wisdom of the ages, insights into the mysteries of the past that had been lost to the world. As she delved into the manuscripts, Eleanor realized that the true treasure was the knowledge contained within these pages, a legacy of wisdom that had the power to enlighten the world. The Waverly ancestors had understood the significance of this knowledge and had gone to great lengths to protect it until the time was right for its revelation. With the discovery of the Waverly treasure, Eleanor found herself at a crossroads. She could reveal her findings to the world, sharing the knowledge and insights of the Waverly ancestors, or she could choose to protect the legacy, as her ancestors had, until the world was ready for its truths. As the storm broke over Waverly, with rain lashing against the windows of the old estate, Eleanor made her decision. She would become the guardian of the Waverly legacy, dedicating her life to understanding its secrets and preparing for the day when the world would be ready to receive its wisdom. The tale of Eleanor's journey to Waverly and the discovery of the treasure became a legend in its own right, a story of adventure, mystery, and the unbreakable bond between the past and the present. And as for the town of Waverly, it no longer stood in silence but whispered of the courage and determination of one woman who had dared to unlock the secrets of the past, ensuring that the legacy of the Waverly family would live on for generations to come. Story 12. Under the dense canopy of the Amazon rainforest, where the sun barely pierced through the foliage, Dr. Lena Halberg and her team of scientists established their research camp. They were there on a mission to study the unique flora and fauna of the region, but Lena, a botanist with an adventurous spirit, was drawn by rumors of a plant believed to possess unparalleled medicinal properties, a discovery that could revolutionize modern medicine. The plant, known to the local tribes as Ixora's heart, was said to bloom once every decade, under the light of a full moon. Its location was a well-guarded secret, protected by both the dense forest and the tribes who considered it sacred. As Lena and her team delved deeper into the rainforest, they encountered wonders and dangers alike. Exotic birds took flight at their approach, their feathers a burst of color against the green backdrop. Shadows moved just beyond their line of sight, hints of the elusive creatures that called the forest home. Their journey was arduous, the environment unforgiving. Lena, however, was undeterred. Her determination stemmed from more than scientific curiosity, it was personal. Her mother had succumbed to a disease that had confounded doctors, a fate that Lena hoped future discoveries could prevent. Guided by a map obtained through negotiations with a local tribe, and driven by her mission, Lena led her team through the heart of the jungle. Days turned into weeks, each step forward a battle against nature and their own limitations. Then, on a night when the moon hung full and bright in the sky, casting a silver glow over the forest, they found it Ixora's heart. The plant was unlike any Lena had seen before, its leaves shimmering with an inner light, its flowers pulsating softly, in rhythm with the very heartbeat of the forest. The moment was short-lived. The team's presence had not gone unnoticed. They were surrounded by members of the local tribe, the guardians of Ixora's heart. The standoff was tense, a silent confrontation in the moonlit clearing. It was then that Lena took a step forward, her intentions clear. She wasn't there to exploit, she was there to learn, to share knowledge for the betterment of all. With a gesture of peace, she offered the tribe the medical supplies they had brought, a token of goodwill. The tribe's shaman, a figure of authority and respect, stepped forward to meet her. Through a mixture of broken language and gestures, an understanding was reached. Lena and her team were allowed to study the plant, under the condition that any findings would be shared with the tribe, ensuring that the benefits of Ixora's heart would not be lost to greed. The weeks that followed were a time of unprecedented collaboration. Lena worked alongside the tribe, learning their ways, their deep connection to the land, and the secrets of the rainforest that had been passed down through generations. Ixora's heart proved to be a treasure trove of medicinal properties, its potential far exceeding Lena's expectations. But with discovery came responsibility. The plant was rare, its ecosystem fragile. The true challenge was not just in unlocking its secrets, but in protecting it from the outside world, from those who would see it as nothing more than a commodity. As the research expedition came to an end, Lena knew that her journey was far from over. She had found Ixora's heart, but in doing so, had uncovered a greater mission to bridge the gap between modern science and ancient wisdom, ensuring that the treasures of the rainforest could be preserved and shared for generations to come. Lena's findings were published, her discoveries hailed as a breakthrough in the field of medicine. But more importantly, her experience in the Amazon changed the way she approached her work. She became an advocate for conservation, for the respectful integration of traditional knowledge with scientific research, championing a future where both could thrive. The story of Lena and Ixora's heart became a beacon, illuminating the importance of understanding, respecting, and protecting the natural world. It was a reminder that the greatest discoveries often lie not just in the science itself, but in the journey, the collaboration, and the shared humanity that brings us closer to the mysteries of the natural world. Story 13. In the sprawling expanse of the Nevada desert, under the cloak of endless night, lies the small, almost forgotten town of Dry Creek. This town, with its dwindling population and buildings that whisper tales of better days, holds a secret buried beneath its sands, a secret that Eleanor Rigby, a young journalist hungry for her big break, was about to stumble upon. Eleanor had heard rumors of Dry Creek's mysterious past during her tenure at a local newspaper. Tales of unexplained phenomena, sightings of strange lights in the sky, and whispers of a government cover-up piqued her interest. Armed with nothing but her camera, notepad, and an insatiable curiosity, Eleanor set off for Dry Creek, determined to uncover the truth. Her arrival in Dry Creek was met with wary eyes and tight-lipped residents. It became immediately clear that this town, with its sun-bleached streets and silent, watchful desert, wasn't eager to share its secrets with an outsider. Undeterred, Eleanor began her investigation, visiting local haunts and attempting to engage with the townspeople. It wasn't until she met old Joe, the proprietor of the town's dusty diner and a fixture in Dry Creek, that Eleanor found her first real lead. Over cups of bitter coffee, Joe shared hushed stories of Dry Creek's heyday, when it was rumored to be the site of an undisclosed military base. He spoke of strange experiments, aircraft of unknown origin, and the night the sky was set ablaze with an otherworldly light. Encouraged by Joe's tales, Eleanor ventured into the desert, following old maps and Joe's cryptic directions. Her journey led her to the remains of what appeared to be a military facility, its structures half swallowed by the desert sands, the silence of the place as oppressive as the heat. As she explored the dilapidated buildings, Eleanor discovered evidence of experiments that defied explanation, technologies that seemed too advanced for their time, documents alluding to extraterrestrial artifacts, and, most chillingly, a hidden underground lab that bore signs of a hasty evacuation. Eleanor's discoveries were groundbreaking, the story of a lifetime, but as she delved deeper, she began to realize the gravity of what she had uncovered. She wasn't just facing a forgotten chapter of history, she was up against forces that would do anything to keep these secrets buried. Her presence in Dry Creek hadn't gone unnoticed. Eleanor found herself being followed, her every move watched. The more she uncovered, the more dangerous her situation became. It was a race against time to bring the truth to light before it could be silenced forever. The climax of her investigation came on a night when the desert sky was lit by an unexpected meteor shower. Under the cover of this celestial event, Eleanor met with a whistleblower, a former scientist from the facility, who confirmed her findings and provided the last piece of the puzzle, a piece that connected Dry Creek to a nationwide web of secrecy and discovery. With the evidence in hand, Eleanor published her story, exposing the hidden history of Dry Creek and its significance to national security and scientific advancement. The article caused a sensation, catapulting Eleanor to the forefront of investigative journalism and prompting a renewed interest in the mysteries of Dry Creek. However, the truth came at a cost. Eleanor's revelations drew the attention of those who had sought to keep Dry Creek's secrets, putting her in the crosshairs of a debate that spanned the realms of national security, scientific ethics, and the public's right to know. In the end, Eleanor Rigby's journey into the heart of Dry Creek was more than just a quest for truth. It was a testament to the power of determination, the importance of transparency, and the unyielding quest for understanding in a world that often prefers the comfort of shadows. Her story served as a reminder that sometimes the greatest discoveries lie not in the stars but buried in the sands beneath our feet, waiting for someone brave enough to unearth them. Story 14. In the shadow of the Appalachian Mountains, nestled among rolling hills and verdant forests, lies the small town of Harper's Glen, known for its scenic beauty and the tight-knit community that calls it home. Harper's Glen harbors a secret that dates back centuries, a secret bound by a pact made under the light of a blood moon, meant to protect the town and its people from an ancient curse. Julia Evans, a young woman with roots deep in the history of Harper's Glen, returns to her hometown after years away in the city. Her return is marked by a series of strange occurrences that begin to unravel the fabric of the quiet life she remembered. Livestock found mysteriously drained of blood, unseasonal storms that threaten the town's crops, and an inexplicable sense of dread that settles over Harper's Glen like a shroud. As the town grapples with these unsettling events, Julia is drawn to the old Harper estate, a sprawling, dilapidated mansion that overlooks the town from a secluded hilltop. The mansion, long abandoned, was once the heart of Harper's Glen, home to the town's founders and the keepers of its secrets. Driven by a need to understand the strange events plaguing Harper's Glen, Julia ventures into the mansion, where she discovers an ancient book hidden within a secret chamber, a book that tells the story of the original pact made by the town's founders with a mysterious entity that dwells within the forest, a being of immense power that promised prosperity in exchange for a sacrifice once every century. The realization dawns on Julia that the time for the next sacrifice is near, and the signs plaguing the town are warnings of the curse's return. Faced with the reality of the pact and the price of breaking it, Julia finds herself at the center of a struggle to save Harper's Glen from a fate sealed by its ancestors. As the night of the blood moon approaches, Julia, along with a group of allies, she gathers descendants of the town's founders, each with their own reasons for wanting to break the curse, embarks on a perilous journey into the heart of the ancient forest to confront the entity and end the cycle of sacrifices. Their journey is fraught with challenges that test their courage, their bonds, and their understanding of the world. They encounter guardians of the forest, creatures of myth that serve the entity, and unravel truths about Harper's Glen that had been lost to time. In the climax, beneath the crimson glow of the blood moon, Julia and her allies face the entity in a confrontation that will determine the fate of Harper's Glen. The battle is fierce, a clash of wills and magic where Julia must use all her wits and bravery to outmaneuver the entity. In the end, it is not through force that the curse is broken, but through understanding and a new pact, one that redefines the relationship between the town and the ancient powers of the forest. With the curse lifted, Harper's Glen awakens to a new dawn, free from the shadow that had hung over it for centuries. The town rebuilds, stronger and more united than before, with Julia and her friends hailed as heroes. However, the pact they've made is a reminder that the peace they've won is one that must be maintained, not just for their generation, but for all those that will follow. Julia's return to Harper's Glen, meant to be a temporary escape from the chaos of city life, becomes a journey of discovery, not just of her town's hidden past, but of her own strength and destiny. Harper's Glen, with its beauty and its secrets, remains a testament to the power of community, the depths of history, and the enduring magic that binds them. Story 15. I never thought my obsession with old newspapers would lead me into the heart of a chilling mystery. It all began when I stumbled upon a pile of newspapers from the 1980s in my attic. Flicking through the yellowed pages, an article caught my eye. It detailed a series of unexplained disappearances in my small town, all occurring on foggy nights. The police were baffled, and the cases remained unsolved. Curiosity piqued. I decided to delve deeper. Each evening after work, I'd sift through more newspapers, piecing together the chilling accounts. Witnesses spoke of seeing a strange figure lurking near the homes of the disappeared, but no further leads could be found. The figure was described as tall, unnaturally thin, and always seen in the densest fog. The more I read, the more consumed I became with finding out what happened. I visited the local library, scoured public records, and interviewed longtime residents. My investigation led me to a pattern: all disappearances happened within a 5-mile radius of the old, abandoned factory at the town's edge. Driven by a mix of fear and determination, I ventured to the factory one foggy night. The building loomed over me, its silhouette a menacing reminder of the town's industrial past. As I approached, the fog thickened, swallowing the weak beam of my flashlight. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the silence was oppressive. I navigated through the maze of machinery, my heart pounding in my chest. Then I heard a soft, dragging sound echoing through the halls. My initial instinct was to run, but my feet carried me forward until I saw him. The man was as the articles had described, but there was nothing supernatural about him. He was old, his body bent from years of living in the shadows. In his eyes there was a mix of confusion and fear. He told me his story in broken sentences, a tale of being wrongfully accused, of seeking refuge in the only place he wasn't hunted, and of a life spent in isolation. As I left the factory, guiding the man to the warmth of my car, I realized the true horror wasn't in the tales of ghosts or monsters. It was in the reality of a man's life, turned into a living nightmare by suspicion and abandonment. I escorted the man to the local authorities, where he was met with disbelief at first. However, as he shared his story, corroborated by the details I had unearthed in my research, the police began to see the truth in his words. The man, once thought to be a sinister figure lurking in the shadows, was merely a victim of circumstance, cast aside by society and forgotten. The townsfolk were stunned by the revelation. Guilt washed over the community as they realized the stories they had whispered for years, tales meant to induce fear, were rooted in the tragic reality of a man's life ruined by misunderstanding and fear of the unknown. His name was Samuel, and he had worked at the factory before it closed down, leaving him jobless and destitute. Accused of a crime he didn't commit, and with no one to vouch for his innocence, Samuel fled to the only place he thought he could hide the factory. Over the years, he became a ghost story, a cautionary tale to keep children indoors on foggy nights. My involvement in Samuel's story didn't end with his discovery. I took it upon myself to help him reintegrate into society. It was a slow process, filled with challenges, but also moments of profound humanity. People who had once whispered his name in fear now extended hands of friendship. Samuel, with his quiet dignity and resilience, taught us all a lesson in forgiveness and the dangers of letting fear dictate our actions. Story 16. I've always prided myself on being a rational person, someone who looks for logical explanations and doesn't jump to conclusions. That was until the summer of 2018, when I took a job as a night security guard at an old museum in the heart of the city. The museum, housed in a 19th century mansion, was known for its collection of historical artifacts and oddities. My job was simple: patrol the halls, ensure the exhibits remained undisturbed, and most importantly, make sure no one attempted to break in after hours. The first few nights were uneventful, almost monotonous. I'd make my rounds, occasionally stopping to admire a piece of ancient pottery or a beautifully crafted sword from the Renaissance. However, everything changed one night when a persistent banging sound drew me to the basement. The basement was off limits to the public, used mainly for storage and rarely visited even by staff. As I descended the creaky wooden stairs, the temperature dropped significantly, a coldness that seeped into my bones. The banging grew louder, more insistent, as if trying to communicate an urgent message. In the dim light, I could see that the noise emanated from an old, wooden crate labeled "Exhibit Not to Be Displayed." My curiosity overcame my apprehension, and I pried open the crate with a crowbar. Inside was a statue nearly 3 feet tall, depicting a creature that seemed to be part man, part beast, with eyes that bore an uncanny semblance to human sorrow. No sooner had I laid eyes on the statue than the air around me began to stir, a whispering sound filling the room. The whispers weren't words, but emotions: anger, sadness, desperation conveyed so intensely that I found myself overwhelmed with feelings that weren't my own. Panicked, I resealed the crate and hurried upstairs, but the sensation of being watched followed me. For the remainder of my shift, I felt a presence, an inexplicable feeling of being accompanied by something unseen. The following days brought a series of unexplainable occurrences: objects moving on their own, shadows flickering in the corners of my vision, and the constant feeling of cold air brushing against my skin. I began to dread my nightly shifts, each hour stretching into an eternity of anxiety and fear. It was then that I started researching the statue, poring over old museum records and archives. What I found was a history shrouded in mystery and speculation. The statue was discovered in the early 1900s, unearthed from an ancient site believed to have been a place of worship for a long-forgotten deity. Eager to uncover more, I reached out to an expert in ancient religions and artifacts, Dr. Helena Morris, hoping she could shed some light on the statue and its origins. Dr. Morris was fascinated by my description and agreed to visit the museum after hours to examine the artifact firsthand. The night of her visit, the air was thick with anticipation. As we opened the crate together, the temperature in the room plummeted, and the previously inanimate statue seemed to pulse with an unseen energy. Dr. Morris, undeterred by the chill and the creeping sense of unease, examined the statue meticulously. Her conclusion was as unsettling as it was unbelievable. According to her, the statue was a relic from a cult that worshipped an entity they believed could traverse the boundaries between the physical world and the realm of spirits. The creature depicted was not a god but a mediator, a bridge between life and death, reality and the beyond. Dr. Morris theorized that the unusual occurrences in the museum could be the result of the statue's presence, a beacon for spirits drawn to its energy. Her words, meant to provide answers, only fueled my fear. The thought of working nights with the conduit to another world lurking in the basement was unbearable. But before I could voice my desire to quit, Dr. Morris suggested an alternative. She believed that by conducting a ritual described in ancient texts, we could pacify the entity and put an end to the disturbances. Driven by a desperate need for normalcy, I agreed to participate. The ritual, conducted at the stroke of midnight, was a surreal experience. Candles flickered as Dr. Morris chanted in a language I didn't understand. The air vibrated with a power that made my skin tingle, and for a moment, the boundary between the seen and the unseen felt perilously thin. As the final words of the chant echoed through the halls, a profound silence enveloped us. The oppressive feeling of being watched lifted, and for the first time in weeks, I breathed easily. The museum returned to its former tranquility, the odd occurrences ceased, and the statue, though remaining in the basement, lost its ominous aura. In the aftermath, I found myself changed. No longer could I claim to be a strict rationalist, for I had experienced the inexplicable. The world, I realized, was far more complex and mysterious than I had ever imagined. And while fear had been a constant companion during those unsettling weeks, so too was awe, a reminder of the incredible, unseen forces that shape our lives. With the mystery resolved, I continued my work at the museum, albeit with a newfound respect for the artifacts and their histories. The statue remained in the basement, a silent guardian of secrets too vast for the human mind to comprehend. And as for me, I learned to embrace the unknown, for sometimes the most profound truths lie beyond the veil of understanding. Story 17. In the quiet town of Willow's End, nestled among towering pine trees and fog-laden hills, there existed a legend known to every local but spoken of only in hushed tones. The legend spoke of the Hollow, a dense, shadow-filled forest that bordered the town, and of the creatures that dwelled within, guarding its secrets. My name is Alex, and I never believed in such tales until the night I found myself lost in the heart of the Hollow. It was on the eve of the autumn equinox, a time when the veil between worlds is said to be at its thinnest, that I ventured into the forest. I was a photographer, driven by a desire to capture the unexplained and the supernatural. The Hollow, with its centuries-old folklore, was the perfect subject for my next project. Armed with my camera and a flashlight, I stepped into the woods, oblivious to the warning signs posted at the edge of the town. The forest was alive with sounds: the rustling of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, and the soft whisper of the wind. Initially, I was consumed by the beauty of the night, my camera clicking away as I tried to capture the essence of the Hollow. But as I ventured deeper, a sense of unease began to creep over me. The trees grew denser, their gnarled branches intertwining above me, blotting out the stars. The air grew colder, and the once familiar sounds of the forest were replaced by an oppressive silence. I should have turned back then, but my curiosity propelled me forward until I came upon a clearing. In the center stood an ancient stone well, its presence inexplicable in the depths of the forest. Drawn to it, I approached, peering into the darkness below. What I saw made my blood run cold, a pair of luminous eyes staring back at me from the abyss. Panicked, I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my chest. The ground beneath my feet gave way, and I fell, my scream swallowed by the night. I awoke to find myself at the bottom of the well, bruised but alive. The eyes were gone, replaced by the faint glow of bioluminescent fungi illuminating the walls. Climbing out was impossible. The walls were too steep, too slick with moss. Despair set in as I realized my plight. I was trapped, likely to become another tale whispered among the townsfolk. Hours passed, or perhaps it was days. Time lost its meaning in the darkness of the well. Just when hope seemed lost, a voice echoed down to me. It was soft and melodic, speaking in a language I couldn't understand but felt soothing, calming. The luminous eyes reappeared, but this time they were accompanied by a figure. She was ethereal, her form barely visible, illuminated by the glow of the fungi. She spoke again, and though I couldn't comprehend her words, I sensed no malice, only curiosity. Using gesture, she communicated, offering me a way out. A series of handholds and footholds appeared on the well's walls, glowing faintly as if by magic. With her guidance, I climbed, reaching the top with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. She vanished as I emerged, leaving me to wonder if she had been a figment of my imagination. Back in the safety of my home, I processed the photographs taken before my fall. Among them was an image of the well, and standing beside it, barely visible, was the figure of the woman who had saved me. It was proof, however inexplicable, of her existence and of the supernatural world that lay hidden within the hollow. My experience in the hollow changed me. I became obsessed with the folklore of Willow's End, dedicating my time to uncovering the truth behind the tales. I learned of the guardian of the hollow, a spirit said to protect the forest and its secrets from those who would secret sit. The townsfolk believed that on rare occasions, the guardian would reveal herself to those who found themselves lost within the forest, guiding them to safety. Driven by a need to understand, I ventured into the hollow time and time again, hoping to encounter the guardian once more. And though I never did, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was there, watching over the forest and its visitors. The photographs I took that night became the cornerstone of my exhibition, drawing crowds from far and wide. People were fascinated by the story of my encounter, and the image of the guardian sparked debates and discussions about the existence of the supernatural. As for me, I continued to explore the mysteries of the world, my camera always at my side. But no adventure, no discovery, ever compared to that night in the hollow. It remained my most profound encounter with the unknown, a reminder of the wonders and terrors that lie just beyond our understanding. Story 18. The first snowfall of the year had blanketed Willow's End in white, transforming the town into a scene from a holiday card. It was during this time of peace and celebration that I received a letter, its contents a plea for help from an old friend, Sarah, who lived in a remote village in the northern mountains. Sarah spoke of strange occurrences in her village, of shadows that whispered in the night, and of residents who vanished without a trace. Compelled by a sense of duty and the thrill of the unknown, I packed my camera and set out for Sarah's village. The journey was long and arduous, the roads barely visible beneath the snow. When I finally arrived, the village was eerily silent, the only sign of life being the faint glow of lanterns through frosted windows. Sarah greeted me with a mixture of relief and fear. She spoke of the nights filled with strange noises, of figures seen moving through the storm, and of a darkness that seemed to seep into everything. The villagers were terrified, their once close-knit community fracturing under the weight of suspicion and fear. Determined to uncover the truth, I set out each night, camera in hand, braving the cold and the unknown. It wasn't long before I experienced the phenomena Sarah had described. Shadows danced at the corner of my vision, elusive and fleeting, and whispers filled the air, voices so faint I doubted my own senses. One night, deep in the forest that surrounded the village, I saw a procession of figures, their forms barely human, moving through the trees. They were led by a creature of shadow and ice, its eyes a piercing blue that seemed to cut through the darkness. I followed at a distance, my camera capturing every moment, until they disappeared into an ancient ruin, swallowed by the night. The next day I showed Sarah the photographs, and the fear in her eyes told me all I needed to know. She recognized the ruin, an old monastery long abandoned and shunned by the villagers, said to be cursed. Despite Sarah's protests, I knew what I had to do. That night I ventured to the monastery, the air around me crackling with an unseen energy. The ruin was a skeleton of stone, its walls worn by time and the elements. As I approached, the temperature dropped, breath turning to mist, and the whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices that seemed to come from the very walls. In the heart of the monastery, I found the source of the village's torment, a rift, a tear in the fabric of reality itself, from which the shadows and their master emanated. The creature of shadow and ice stood before it, its gaze fixed on me, a challenge and a warning. What happened next is a blur, a battle of wills between myself and the creature, fought not with weapons but with determination and a desperate hope. I don't know how, but I managed to close the rift, sealing the creature and its minions back into whatever realm they had come from. Exhausted and injured, I collapsed, the snow around me stained with blood. When I awoke, it was to the faces of Sarah and the other villagers, their expressions a mix of awe and gratitude. The shadows were gone, the whispers silenced, and the village slowly began to heal. I left the village not long after, my body and spirit weary but my resolve stronger than ever. The photographs I took that night, proof of the unbelievable, became my most prized possessions, a reminder of the night I faced the darkness and prevailed. But more than that, they were a reminder that the world is filled with mysteries, some beautiful, some terrifying, and that sometimes the line between the natural and the supernatural is not as clear as we might believe. Story 19. The next story unfolds on a long, desolate stretch of highway known as Route 29, a road whispered about in truck stops and diners for reasons that go beyond its treacherous turns and the thick fog that often blankets its path. It was on Route 29 that I found myself one fateful night, the road stretching endlessly before me, my truck's headlights barely piercing the dense fog. I had heard the stories, of course, tales of hitchhikers who vanish into the mist, of strange lights dancing on the horizon, and of the feeling of being watched from the darkness beyond the road. I had dismissed them as nothing more than tall tales, stories to pass the time during long, lonely nights on the road. But that night, as the fog grew thicker and the world outside my truck narrowed to a tunnel of dim light, I began to understand the fear that lay behind those stories. I was hauling a load of furniture from one coast to the other, a routine trip made countless times before. But there was nothing routine about Route 29. The radio, usually a constant companion, offered only static as I ventured further into the fog. It was then, in the silence and isolation of the highway, that I saw her. A figure emerged from the fog, a young woman standing on the side of the road, her thumb outstretched. She was dressed oddly for the weather in a light dress, and she seemed unaffected by the cold. Against my better judgment, I pulled over. The road was notorious for its dangers, and leaving someone stranded seemed a greater risk than any ghost story. She climbed into the passenger seat, offering a smile and a quiet thank you. Her name was Eliza, and she spoke little of where she was going or why. There was something unsettling about her, a sense of being out of place in time, but the urge to help overrode my unease. As we drove, the fog seemed to grow denser, the road ahead disappearing into white nothingness. Eliza's presence became my anchor to reality, her occasional comments on the scenery the only proof that I hadn't lost my way entirely. It wasn't until I noticed her reflections in the truck's windows that I realized she wasn't casting one. A chill ran down my spine, but before I could voice my fear, she pointed ahead. "Stop here," she said, her voice no longer the quiet, timid tone she had used before, but commanding, almost urgent. I obeyed, the truck coming to a halt at a spot that seemed no different from the miles we had traversed. "This is where I get off," she stated, opening the door and stepping out into the fog. I watched her vanish, swallowed by the mist within seconds. The sense of unease lingered long after she disappeared, a nagging thought that what had just happened transcended the bounds of the natural world. Shaken, I continued my journey, the encounter replaying in my mind. It was only upon reaching my destination and recounting the tale that I learned of Eliza's story. She was a local legend, a girl who had vanished on Route 29 decades ago, never to be found. Some said she wandered the road, seeking passage to the place she could never reach in life. The rest of the trip passed in a blur, the mundane tasks of unloading and paperwork unable to distract from my thoughts. The encounter with Eliza haunted me, a ghostly presence that lingered at the edge of my consciousness. In the weeks that followed, I found myself drawn to Route 29, a part of me searching for answers, another hoping for another glimpse of the girl who existed between worlds. Each journey brought a mix of fear and anticipation, the road a gateway to the unknown. I never saw Eliza again, but the experience changed me. The road, with its fog and its legends, became a symbol of the mysteries that lie just beyond our understanding, a reminder of the thin veil between the seen and unseen. My travels continued, the highways and byways of the country unfurling before me, but Route 29 remained unique, a stretch of road marked by an encounter that blurred the lines between reality and the supernatural. It was a story I carried with me, a tale to share in the quiet hours of the night when the world seems open to the impossible. As the years passed, my skepticism softened, replaced by a sense of wonder at the unexplained mysteries that dot our world. And though I never again experienced anything quite like my night on Route 29, I kept driving, always searching, always wondering what lies just beyond the reach of our headlights in the fog. Story 20. I always considered myself lucky to live in a small, quiet town. Life was simple, the people were friendly, and nothing ever disturbed the peace. That is until the day the newspapers stopped arriving. At first, it seemed like a minor inconvenience. Perhaps the delivery person was ill, or there was a mix-up at the press. But as one day turned into 3, then a week, with no word or explanation, a blanket of unease settled over our little community. I decided to investigate. The local newsstand, once bustling with activity, now stood deserted, the usual piles of papers conspicuously absent. The owner, Mr. Thompson, was just as puzzled as the rest of us. He hadn't heard from the delivery drivers or the publishers, and his calls went unanswered. It was as if the newspapers had simply vanished into thin air. Curiosity turned to concern when I noticed other oddities. The usual hum of daily life began to quiet. Conversations hushed when I approached, eyes darted away, and an air of secrecy took hold. It wasn't just the newspapers, something was deeply wrong. One night, driven by a restless need for answers, I ventured out. The streets, usually lit by the warm glow of streetlights, were darker than I remembered. I made my way to the newspaper office on the edge of town. The building, a once thriving hub of local journalism, stood silent, its windows dark. But as I approached, I noticed something unsettling, a faint light flickering through the cracks of the boarded-up windows. My heart pounded as I pressed against the cold wood, peering through a narrow slit. Inside, the remnants of the newsroom were strewn with papers, but it was the center of the room that caught my attention. A group of people, their backs to me, huddled around something I couldn't see. Their low murmurs were punctuated by occasional sharp cries that made my blood run cold. In that moment, a hand clamped over my mouth, and I was yanked backward into the shadows. I struggled, but the grip only tightened, a whisper in my ear, "Not safe." "Follow me." Panic gave way to a desperate trust as I allowed myself to be led away from the light and deeper into the darkness. My guide was an older man, his face familiar but hard to place in the dim light. "You shouldn't have come here," he breathed, his eyes scanning the shadows as if expecting them to burst to life. "There are things in this town, secrets, that are better left undiscovered." We moved stealthily through the back alleys until we reached his home. Inside, he began to explain. The newspapers had uncovered a story, something so dangerous and alarming that it threatened to tear the fabric of our small community apart. The But before the story could be published, they vanished: reporters, editors, even the delivery drivers. No one knew where they went or what had become of them. The story was about, he paused, swallowing hard, it was about the town itself. Something ancient and malevolent that lies beneath, something that controls everything and everyone here. The newspapers tried to expose it, but they were silenced. I sat there, a chill creeping up my spine as the man detailed a conspiracy so deep and so dark that it seemed almost unbelievable. Yet the fear in his eyes, the tangible sense of danger that hung in the air, lent a terrifying credibility to his words. The urgency in his voice was palpable, but leaving everything behind wasn't a simple decision. My life, my memories, everything I knew was in this town. Yet the terror in the man's eyes and the eerie silence that had fallen over our street spoke volumes of the danger we faced. It was a choice between the known and the unknown, safety and peril. I need to think, I stammered, my mind racing with the implications of his revelations. The man nodded solemnly, understanding the turmoil that churned within me. You don't have much time, he warned. By dawn, they'll know someone else is aware of their secret. And they'll come for you, just like they came for the others. I spent the night tossing and turning, grappling with fear and indecision. But as the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, clarity dawned on me as well. The town I loved, the community I trusted, was a facade masking a malevolent force that threatened to consume us all. The decision was made. I had to leave. With a heavy heart, I packed a small bag, taking only what I needed. The man, now my unlikely guardian, led the way as we slipped out of town under the cover of the early morning light. Behind us, the town lay silent, a sinister sentinel guarding its secrets. As we crossed the town boundary, I couldn't help but look back. The place that had been my home seemed different now, its welcoming warmth replaced by an ominous chill. It was a painful farewell, but necessary for survival. What lay ahead was uncertain, but the one thing I knew for sure was that I could never return. Now, let's embark on the next story, a new narrative steeped in darkness and mystery. I never thought of myself as someone who could get lost. My sense of direction was impeccable, a point of pride. But that was before I found myself on a road I didn't recognize, in the middle of a storm that seemed to come out of nowhere. I was returning from a visit to a friend's house, a route I had taken countless times before, yet nothing around me looked familiar. The rain hammered against my windshield, and the darkness seemed to swallow the beam of my headlights. Attempting to retrace my steps, I took a turn off the main road, hoping to find a landmark or a sign. Instead, I stumbled upon an old rest stop, its neon sign flickering in the storm, promising shelter and safety. Desperation overrode caution as I pulled into the parking lot, the place seemingly deserted. I made my way to the building, the sound of my footsteps muffled by the rain. Inside, the rest stop was eerily quiet, the usual hum of travelers absent. I called out, hoping for an answer, but received only silence in return. A sense of unease settled over me as I explored the dimly lit interior, the feeling of being watched growing stronger with every step. It was then that I heard a soft whisper, almost drowned out by the storm outside. "Help me," the voice was faint, coming from the direction of the restrooms. My heart raced as I debated what to do. Curiosity and concern pushed me forward, guiding me to the source of the plea. What I found there would haunt me for the rest of my life, a revelation so shocking and unexpected that it challenged everything I believed about the world and myself. Story 21. I lived in an apartment complex for years, one of those massive, impersonal towers that housed hundreds of lives within its walls. Among the myriad of neighbors, there was one I never quite understood: Mr. Jacobs, the quiet man next door. Our interactions were limited to polite nods and brief exchanges in the hallway, yet there was an air of mystery about him that piqued my curiosity. One evening, as I returned from a late shift, I noticed Mr. Jacobs' door ajar, a rare occurrence in our security-conscious building. What caught my attention wasn't the open door, but the sound emanating from his apartment, a deep, unsettling chanting that sent shivers down my spine. My first thought was to check on him, concerned that perhaps he was in some sort of trouble. Approaching the door, the chanting grew louder, more fervent. I called out, "Mr. Jacobs, is everything okay?" There was no response, just the continuous, rhythmic drone that seemed to echo through the hallways. My hand trembled as I pushed the door open further, peering inside. The apartment was dimly lit, the only source of light a collection of candles arranged in a strange pattern on the floor. Mr. Jacobs was nowhere to be seen, but the chanting persisted, now clearly coming from a room further inside. Driven by a mix of fear and concern, I stepped into the apartment, my heart pounding in my chest. As I moved toward the source of the sound, the apartment seemed to stretch on impossibly, the hallway twisting and turning in ways that defied the building's layout. The chanting grew louder, almost deafening, and I felt a force pulling me forward, compelling me to continue despite every instinct screaming to turn back. Finally, I reached the room from which the chanting originated. The door creaked open to reveal a scene that was impossible, surreal. Mr. Jacobs stood in the center of a circle of candles, but he was not alone. Surrounding him were figures, shadowy and indistinct, their features blurred as if they were not fully part of this world. The chanting ceased abruptly as I entered, and all eyes are where their eyes should have been turned to me. Mr. Jacobs smiled, a gesture that sent a chill through me. "You've arrived just in time," he said, his voice eerily calm. "You're the final piece we needed." Panic surged through me as I realized the gravity of the situation. This was no ordinary gathering, it was something otherworldly, something dark. The door slammed shut behind me, sealing me inside with them. The figures began to move closer, their forms becoming more defined, more threatening. I backed away, searching frantically for an escape, but the room had changed. There were no doors, no windows, only the flickering candles casting long, ominous shadows. Mr. Jacobs continued to speak, his words now a blur as my focus narrowed to survival. In a moment of sheer desperation, I reached for the nearest candle, throwing it at the wall where the door had once been. The impact was greater than I could have anticipated. The candle's flame ignited something unseen, a barrier that erupted into fire, revealing the door hidden beneath. Without hesitation, I bolted for the door, flinging it open and rushing out into the hallway, which had returned to its normal state. I didn't stop to look back, didn't stop to catch my breath until I was safely inside my own apartment, the door locked securely behind me. The next day, Mr. Jacobs' apartment was empty, as if he and the night's terrifying events had never existed. No one in the building remembered him, and any evidence of his presence was gone without a trace. I was left with more questions than answers, haunted by the memory of that night and the chilling realization that there are mysteries in this world far beyond our understanding. Story 22. I've always been fascinated by the abandoned places, their stories, the secrets they hold, the whispers of the past that linger like ghosts in the air. So when I heard about the old hospital on the outskirts of town, shuttered and forgotten for decades, the lure was irresistible. It was a relic of a bygone era, a place where time stood still, and the stories of those who once walked its halls were etched into the peeling paint and crumbling walls. Gathering a small group of like-minded friends, we planned our exploration for a night when the moon hung full and bright in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the world. Armed with flashlights and a shared sense of adventure, we made our way to the hospital, the excitement palpable among us. The building loomed before us, its imposing facade a stark reminder of what once was. As we breached the threshold, the air shifted, cooler and heavier, as if stepping into another world. Our lights pierced the darkness, revealing the decay that had taken hold. We moved through the corridors, our footsteps echoing, the only sound in the oppressive silence. It was in the heart of the hospital, within the confines of the old psychiatric ward, that we found it a room unlike any other, its door adorned with symbols that chilled the blood. Intrigue overcame caution, and we pushed the door open, entering a space that felt untouched by time. The air was thick, charged with an energy that set our nerves on edge. In the center of the room stood a chair, its restraints worn but intact, suggesting a dark history of suffering and despair. It was as if the very walls whispered the tales of those who had been confined there, their voices a distant echo of agony and madness. Driven by a desire to uncover the truth, we began to investigate, sifting through the remnants of the past. Papers scattered on the floor told of experimental treatments, of patients lost in the grip of their own minds, of a doctor whose ambition crossed the boundaries of ethics and humanity. As the night deepened, a sense of unease grew within me, a feeling that we were not alone. The air seemed to thicken, a palpable tension that made it hard to breathe. And then, without warning, the door slammed shut, plunging us into darkness as our lights flickered and died. Panic ensued, a scramble in the blackness as we sought to escape, but the door refused to budge, as if held by an unseen force. It was then that the whispers began, a cacophony of voices that filled the room, each one a tale of pain and torment. We huddled together, fear binding us as the temperature dropped, breaths visible in the icy air. The chair in the center of the room seemed to loom larger, its presence oppressive, a monument to the suffering that had permeated the very essence of the room. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, silence fell. Our lights flickered back to life, revealing the room unchanged, the door once again ajar as if inviting us to leave. We needed no further encouragement, fleeing the hospital with a speed born of terror, not stopping until the decrepit building was a mere silhouette against the night sky. In the days that followed, we spoke little of what happened, each of us processing the experience in our own way. But the bond that formed in that room of whispers was unbreakable, a shared ordeal that would forever haunt our dreams. I still find myself drawn to the abandoned places, to the stories they hold. But now I approach with a newfound respect, a recognition of the thin veil that separates the past from the present, the living from the echoes of those who have gone before. Our adventure in the old hospital taught me that some doors once opened can never truly be closed again. And some whispers once heard linger forever in the shadows of the mind, a reminder of the night we encountered the unseen, the night we faced the ghosts of the past and emerged forever changed. Story 23. I never believed in curses, nor did I lend credence to tales of haunted places and objects harboring malevolent spirits. My skepticism was as much a part of me as my own shadow, unwavering and constant. That was until I encountered the painting that hung in an obscure, nearly forgotten gallery on the outskirts of town. It was a place I stumbled upon by chance, driven by a sudden rainstorm to seek shelter in its dimly lit confines. The gallery was a testament to obscurity, its walls lined with artwork that seemed to eschew the light, preferring the comfort of the shadows. The curator, an eccentric figure with eyes that held untold stories, welcomed me with a nod, his voice a whisper, "Explore, if you dare." It was in the farthest corner of the gallery, away from the prying eyes of the occasional visitor, that I found it the painting that would unravel the fabric of my reality. It depicted a scene both mesmerizing and terrifying, a dark forest at twilight, the trees alive with unseen watchers, their eyes glowing like embers in the night. In the foreground, a figure stood, its back to the viewer, drawing them into the scene, a silent invitation to step into the canvas. Drawn in by the painting's eerie beauty, I felt a chill run down my spine, an instinctive warning that went unheeded. The longer I gazed, the more the scene seemed to shift, the darkness deepening, the eyes in the forest growing more numerous, more insistent. It was as if the painting breathed, a living entity trapped within the confines of the canvas. Compelled by a force I couldn't understand, I reached out, my fingers brushing the surface. The world around me faded, swallowed by the darkness of the forest. I found myself standing within the painting, the eyes in the trees now fixed upon me, a chorus of whispers filling the air. The figure from the painting turned, its face a mirror of my own, but twisted by fear and despair. It spoke in a voice that was both mine and not. "You are the key. You must close the circle." Before I could respond, the forest came alive, shadows moving with intent, encircling us. The air grew thick, the whispers louder, a cacophony of voices demanding release, demanding a sacrifice. The figure, my doppelganger, stepped back, merging with the darkness, leaving me alone to face the gathering storm. Panic set in as the shadows closed in, their forms taking shape, each one a tormented soul trapped within the painting. I realized then that the painting was not a mere depiction of a place, but a prison, a purgatory for those it had ensnared over the centuries. The eyes in the trees bore into me. A judgment passed, a verdict awaited. I understood that to escape, to break the cycle, I had to confront the darkness, both the one that surrounded me and the one within. Summoning every ounce of courage, I faced the shadows, my voice firm. "I am not your key. I am not your sacrifice." The words felt like a talisman, a shield against the darkness. The forest recoiled, the eyes dimming, the whispers fading into silence. A light pierced the darkness, a pathway back to the world I knew. I stepped forward, each movement a defiance of the fate that had been ordained for me. As I reached the edge of the painting, the world of the gallery rushed back, the storm outside a faint echo of the tempest I had survived. The curator found me on the floor, the painting a benign landscape once more, its secrets hidden beneath layers of paint. He helped me to my feet, his eyes acknowledging the journey I had undertaken, a nod to the unseen battle waged within the confines of the canvas. I left the gallery as the storm cleared, the sun breaking through the clouds. The painting remained, a silent guardian of the threshold between worlds, a reminder of the night I walked within a cursed canvas and emerged, changed, my skepticism a casualty of the encounter. Story 24. Growing up in a small coastal town had its perks, but for me it was the lighthouse that stood as the town's crowning jewel which captivated my imagination the most. Perched at the edge of a jagged cliff, it had been the guardian of the seas for over a century, guiding ships safely to harbor with its unwavering light. But the lighthouse harbored a darker history, one of tragedy and unexplained occurrences that the townsfolk whispered about in hushed tones. My fascination with the lighthouse was a blend of awe and a childlike curiosity for the macabre. It was said that the original keeper, Old Man Harrington, had vanished without a trace one stormy night, his disappearance giving rise to tales of ghostly lights and eerie sounds emanating from the lighthouse. Despite the warnings, or perhaps because of them, I found myself drawn to it, a moth to the flame of its mysteries. As I grew older, the urge to uncover the truth about the lighthouse and Old Man Harrington's fate only intensified. So when the opportunity arose to spend a night within its walls, I seized it with a heart full of excitement and a mind teeming with the possibilities of what I might discover. The night I chose was perfect. A clear sky with the moon casting a silver glow over the sea, the waves whispering secrets against the shore. The key entrusted to me by the town's historian, felt heavy in my pocket as I made my way to the lighthouse, the isolation of its location more pronounced under the cloak of night. Entering the lighthouse, I was immediately struck by the sense of time standing still. The air was thick with the smell of salt and the remnants of oil that once fueled the lantern. Climbing the spiraling staircase, I felt as though I were ascending into another world, each step taking me further from reality and deeper into the realm of legend. Reaching the top, I was greeted by the panoramic view of the sea, the moonlight casting a path across the waters that led directly to the lighthouse. It was a sight of unparalleled beauty, but also one that made me feel incredibly small and vulnerable in the face of the vast, unknowable ocean. As night deepened, I settled in, surrounded by the artifacts of the lighthouse's past keepers, the logs filled with mundane entries that belied the undercurrent of loneliness and isolation that came with the job. It was in these moments of quiet reflection that the lighthouse began to reveal its secrets. First, it was the sound of footsteps, measured and deliberate, ascending the staircase. My heart raced as I realized I was no longer alone. Yet, when I mustered the courage to look, there was no one there. The footsteps faded into the night, leaving me with more questions than answers. Then, the light, long since automated, flickered inexplicably, casting shadows that danced across the walls in a macabre ballet. The temperature dropped, the chill of the air biting as the atmosphere thickened with an unspoken anticipation. It was then that I saw him, Old Man Harrington, or rather his specter, illuminated by the moonlight. He was not the fearsome ghost of local lore, but a figure of sorrow, bound to the lighthouse by a tragedy that was as much a part of him as the light was to the tower. He spoke not with words but with memories, images that flooded my mind of a storm like no other, of a ship caught in its fury, and of a light that failed to guide it home. The grief and guilt that followed had tethered him to the lighthouse, a sentinel not just of the sea but of his own despair. As dawn broke, the specter of Old Man Harrington faded with the darkness, leaving me alone with the rising sun. The experience was both haunting and humbling, a reminder of the weight of duty and the cost of failure. My night in the lighthouse had given me more than just a ghost story. It had unveiled the heart of a man who loved the sea and his duty more than life itself. It was a story of loss, yes, but also one of redemption, for in sharing his tale, Old Man Harrington had found a measure of peace. Returning to the town, I was no longer the same person who had ascended the lighthouse stairs. I had sought out the past, only to discover that the true story was not one of horror, but of humanity, a narrative as complex and profound as the sea itself. And so the lighthouse stands, a beacon not just for ships, but for souls seeking guidance in the darkness, a testament to the enduring power of story and the unbreakable bond between man and the sea. Story 25. Despite my fear, curiosity gnawed at me like a persistent itch. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something lurking beneath the tranquil facade of the lake. With trembling hands, I returned to its shore the next day, determined to uncover its secrets. As I stood by the water's edge, the surface remained eerily calm, reflecting the surrounding forest like a dark mirror. But as the sun dipped below the horizon and the shadows lengthened, a chill breeze whispered through the trees, sending ripples cascading across the lake's surface. In the fading light, I glimpsed something stirring beneath the water, a shape, indistinct and elusive, but undeniably present. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched, transfixed by the sight. Whatever lay beneath the surface seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, drawing me closer with each passing moment. I should have turned and fled, but I couldn't tear myself away. It was as though I was under a spell, held captive by the lake's dark allure. With each step I took toward the water, the air grew colder, the whispers of the forest growing louder in my ears. Just as I reached the water's edge, a hand burst forth from the depths, its fingers gnarled and twisted like the branches of a long-dead tree. I recoiled in horror, stumbling backward as the figure rose from the depths, its eyes burning with an otherworldly light. I turned to run, but my feet felt rooted to the spot as though held in place by unseen hands. The figure advanced, its movements slow and deliberate, like a predator closing in on its prey. Panic surged through me, but no matter how hard I struggled, I couldn't break free from its grasp. As the figure drew closer, its form became clearer, a specter of darkness and despair, its presence suffocating like a thick fog. I closed my eyes, praying for deliverance from the nightmare unfolding before me. But when I opened them again, I found myself standing alone by the lake, the figure gone without a trace. Trembling with fear, I stumbled back into the forest, vowing never to return to that cursed place again. And yet, as I fled from the lake's dark embrace, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was not the last I would see of the sinister figure that lurked beneath its tranquil surface. As I stumbled through the underbrush, my heart raced with fear, each rustle of leaves sending shivers down my spine. The memory of the figure emerging from the lake haunted me, its spectral form etched into my mind like a nightmare I couldn't escape. Despite the darkness pressing in around me, I pushed forward, desperate to put as much distance between myself and that accursed lake as possible. With each step, the forest seemed to close in on me, the trees looming like silent sentinels, their branches reaching out as though to ensnare me in their grasp. I tried to shake off the feeling of being watched, but it clung to me like a suffocating shadow, weighing me down with its oppressive presence. As I stumbled over roots and fallen branches, a sense of dread settled over me like a suffocating blanket. I could hear the whispers of the forest growing louder, their voices filled with malice and menace. It was as though the very air was alive with a malevolent energy, twisting and writhing around me like a serpent poised to strike. With every passing moment, the feeling of being hunted grew stronger, driving me onward with a primal urgency. I knew I had to escape the forest before it swallowed me whole, before whatever lurked within its depths claimed me as its next victim. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I burst through the tree line and into the open, gasping for breath as though I had been held underwater. The moon hung low on the horizon, casting its pale light over the landscape like a beacon of hope in the darkness. But even as I stumbled away from the forest, its dark presence loomed behind me like a specter, its whispers following me like a sinister refrain. And though I knew I had escaped for now, I couldn't shake the feeling that the horrors of that night would haunt me for the rest of my days. Story 26. As I walked through the overgrown path leading to the cemetery, a chill wind swept through the air, carrying with it the scent of decay. The wrought iron gate creaked ominously as I pushed it open, revealing a landscape shrouded in shadows. Tombstones rose like jagged teeth from the earth, their names worn away by time, their epitaphs lost to the ages. I hesitated at the entrance, a sense of unease settling over me like a heavy cloak. The atmosphere was heavy with a palpable sense of sorrow, as though the very ground itself mourned the souls interred within its embrace. But despite the growing feeling of dread in the pit of my stomach, I pressed on, drawn inexorably toward the heart of the cemetery. As I wandered among the graves, the silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant hoot of an owl. The moon hung low in the sky, casting its ghostly light over the landscape, illuminating the weathered stones with an eerie glow. I shivered as a cold breeze whispered through the trees, sending tendrils of mist curling around my feet like skeletal fingers. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I felt a presence watching me from the darkness, its gaze burning into my soul with a malevolent intensity. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding in my chest as I searched for an escape from the oppressive atmosphere that surrounded me. But no matter which way I turned, it felt as though I was trapped in a labyrinth of death, the graves stretching out before me like an endless maze. Suddenly, I stumbled upon a lone mausoleum standing at the center of the cemetery, its stone facade weathered and worn. As I approached, I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me, my vision swimming as though I had been plunged into icy waters. With trembling hands, I pushed open the heavy doors and stepped inside, the darkness enveloping me like a suffocating blanket. The air was thick with the scent of dust and decay, the silence broken only by the sound of my ragged breaths echoing off the walls. I fumbled for my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. What I saw illuminated in its pale glow sent a shiver down my spine, a sea of coffins stacked haphazardly against the walls, their lids hanging open like gaping mouths. As I moved deeper into the mausoleum, I stumbled upon a small chamber hidden in the shadows, its walls adorned with strange symbols and sigils. I felt a sense of unease wash over me as I studied the arcane markings, my skin prickling with a sudden sense of foreboding. But before I could investigate further, I heard a low moan echoing from the darkness, followed by the sound of shuffling footsteps drawing closer with each passing moment. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized I was not alone in the mausoleum, that something lurked in the shadows, waiting to claim me as its own. With a newfound sense of urgency, I turned and fled from the chamber, the darkness swallowing me whole as I raced toward the exit. I could feel the presence behind me growing stronger, its breath hot on my neck as I stumbled through the darkness, my only thought to escape the cemetery before it was too late. As I burst through the doors and into the cool night air, I collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath, as though I had been running for miles. The moon hung overhead, its silvery light casting a ghostly pallor over the landscape, illuminating the graves with an eerie glow. But even as I lay there, shaking and exhausted, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness still lingered, waiting just beyond the edge of the cemetery, ready to claim me as its next victim. And though I knew I had escaped for now, I couldn't help but wonder what horrors awaited those who dared to venture into that forgotten place of the dead. Story 27. The abandoned mill stood on the outskirts of town like a forgotten relic of a bygone era, its crumbling walls a testament to the passage of time. As I approached, the air grew heavy with a sense of unease, the silence broken only by the distant cry of a lone crow. The mill loomed before me, its windows shattered, its doors hanging askew on rusted hinges. Ivy snaked its way up the walls, weaving a tapestry of decay that seemed to devour the building from within. Despite the warning signs, I couldn't resist the pull of curiosity. With each step I took, the sense of foreboding grew stronger, like a weight pressing down on my chest, threatening to suffocate me. As I stepped inside, the darkness enveloped me like a shroud, the air thick with dust and the musty scent of decay. I fumbled for my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness like a knife as I explored the abandoned corridors. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet, the sound echoing through the empty halls like a mournful dirge. I could feel eyes watching me from the shadows, their gaze burning into my soul with a malevolent intensity. I pushed on, my heart pounding in my chest as I searched for some clue to the mill's dark past. But the deeper I delved, the more it seemed as though the building itself was alive, its walls whispering secrets that I could not comprehend. Suddenly, I stumbled upon a staircase hidden behind a crumbling wall, its steps leading down into the depths of the earth. With a sense of trepidation, I descended into the darkness, the air growing colder with each passing moment. As I reached the bottom, I found myself in a vast chamber, its walls adorned with strange symbols and sigils. The air was heavy with the scent of blood, the stench clinging to my clothes like a foul miasma. I moved deeper into the chamber, my footsteps echoing off the stone walls like the tolling of a funeral bell. And then, I saw a figure standing in the center of the room, its features obscured by the shadows. I froze, my breath catching in my throat as I watched the figure approach, its movements slow and deliberate. As it drew nearer, I could see that it was not human, but something far more sinister, a creature of darkness and despair, its eyes burning with an otherworldly light. I tried to flee, but my legs refused to move, as though rooted to the spot by some unseen force. The creature reached out a hand, its fingers elongated and skeletal, and I felt a cold dread wash over me like a tidal wave. But just as it seemed as though all hope was lost, a voice echoed through the darkness, a voice from my past, calling out to me with a familiarity that filled me with both dread and relief. With a surge of adrenaline, I broke free from the creature's grasp and stumbled toward the source of the voice, my heart pounding in my chest. And then I saw him, my brother, standing at the entrance to the chamber, his face pale and drawn with fear. Together we fled from the mill, the darkness receding behind us like a retreating tide. As we emerged into the light of day, I glanced back at the abandoned building, a shiver running down my spine at the thought of the horrors that lay within. But even as we put distance between ourselves and the mill, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness still lingered, waiting to claim its next victim. And though I knew we had escaped for now, I couldn't help but wonder what other horrors awaited those foolish enough to venture into its depths. As my brother and I stumbled out of the abandoned mill, the world outside seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The sunlight poured down like a blessing, warming our chilled skin and dispelling the lingering shadows that clung to us like a curse. But even as we caught our breath, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness still lurked just beyond the edge of our vision, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. We made our way back to town in silence, the events of the night weighing heavily on our minds. With each step, the memory of the creature in the depths of the mill haunted me like a ghost, its presence a constant reminder of the horrors we had witnessed. As we reached the safety of our home, my brother turned to me, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and gratitude. "We should never speak of what happened tonight," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "No one would believe us, and I fear what might happen if the darkness were to find us again." I nodded in agreement, knowing that he spoke the truth. Some horrors were best left buried in the depths of memory, never to be unearthed again. But despite our best efforts to forget, the memory of that night would haunt me for years to come, a shadow that lingered at the edge of my consciousness, waiting to remind me of the darkness that lurked just beyond the veil of reality. Story 28. The mansion loomed before me like a specter from a forgotten dream, its grandeur faded and worn with the passage of time. Ivy crawled up its weathered walls, twisting and tangling like the fingers of a long-dead creature, while the windows stared out blankly, their glass eyes reflecting nothing but emptiness. As I stepped through the crumbling doorway, the air grew heavy with the scent of decay, the silence broken only by the sound of my own footsteps echoing off the walls. Dust motes danced in the faint light that filtered through the broken windows, casting eerie shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. I wandered through the empty halls, the grandeur of the mansion a stark contrast to the desolation that surrounded it. Each room I entered held its own secrets, its own ghosts from a past long forgotten. In the parlor, I found a grand piano covered in a thick layer of dust, its keys yellowed with age. As I ran my fingers over the keys, a haunting melody filled the air, the music echoing through the empty halls like a lament for the souls lost to time. In the dining room, the table was set with fine china and silverware, as though awaiting the arrival of guests who would never come. The air was thick with the scent of decay, the remnants of a feast long gone sour. And in the ballroom, I found a lone figure dancing in the moonlight, its movements graceful and fluid, as though lost in a world of its own making. But as I approached, the figure vanished into thin air, leaving behind nothing but a cold chill that lingered in the air like a whisper of the past. With each room I explored, The sense of unease grew stronger, as though the mansion itself was alive with a malevolent energy, watching my every move with a sense of foreboding. But despite the growing feeling of dread in the pit of my stomach, I pressed on, determined to uncover the secrets that lay hidden within the mansion's walls. And as I delved deeper into its depths, I knew that I was drawing closer to the truth, closer to the darkness that lurked at the heart of the forgotten mansion. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Shadows seemed to flicker and dance at the edges of my vision, disappearing when I turned to look directly at them. The air grew colder with each passing moment, sending a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the decaying state of the building. In the library, shelves lined the walls, their once grand volumes now covered in a thick layer of dust. I ran my fingers along the spines, feeling the weight of years of neglect pressing down on me like a physical force. As I pulled out a book at random and opened it, the pages crumbled to dust in my hands, the words lost to time. Moving through the mansion felt like traversing a labyrinth, with each hallway leading to another maze of rooms and corridors. It was easy to become disoriented, to lose track of time and space as the darkness closed in around me like a suffocating blanket. In one room, I stumbled upon a portrait hanging on the wall, a woman with eyes that seemed to follow me wherever I went. Her expression was one of sadness and longing, as though she were trapped in the painting, forever yearning to escape into the world beyond. As I studied the portrait, a voice whispered in my ear, sending a chill down my spine. I turned, but there was no one there, only the empty room stretching out before me like a yawning abyss. With a sense of growing unease, I pressed on, determined to uncover the truth behind the mansion's dark history. But the deeper I delved, the more it seemed as though the building itself was resisting my efforts, as though it were determined to keep its secrets buried forever. In the attic, I found a chest hidden beneath a tattered sheet, its lid covered in intricate carvings. With trembling hands, I lifted the lid and peered inside, expecting to find nothing but dust and cobwebs. But as I gazed into the depths of the chest, I found something that made my blood run cold, a collection of old journals, their pages yellowed with age. As I flipped through them, I realized they belonged to the mansion's former owner, a man named Jonathan Sinclair. With a growing sense of trepidation, I began to read, the words on the page painting a picture of a man consumed by darkness and despair. Jonathan Sinclair had been a recluse, shunned by society and haunted by his own demons. He had poured his soul into the pages of these journals, documenting his descent into madness with a clarity that chilled me to the bone. As I read on, I realized that Jonathan had been conducting experiments in the mansion, experiments that bordered on the edge of the supernatural. He had been obsessed with unlocking the secrets of life and death, with harnessing the power of the unknown for his own twisted purposes. But something had gone horribly wrong, something that had unleashed a darkness that consumed everything it touched. Jonathan had become a prisoner in his own home, tormented by visions and haunted by the spirits of those he had wronged. With a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I realized that I was not alone in the mansion, that the darkness that lurked within its walls was all too real. And as the shadows closed in around me, I knew that if I didn't find a way out soon, I would become just another victim of the forgotten mansion's dark legacy. Story 29. The path leading to the lighthouse was treacherous, strewn with jagged rocks and tangled underbrush. Each step I took seemed to echo off the cliffs, the sound swallowed by the crashing waves below. But despite the danger, I pressed on, drawn by an inexplicable pull toward the beacon that pierced the night sky. As I reached the base of the lighthouse, a sense of unease settled over me like a heavy fog. The structure loomed above me, its weathered walls bearing the scars of countless storms. The air was thick with the scent of salt and seaweed, mingling with the faintest hint of decay. With a trembling hand, I pushed open the door and stepped inside, the sound of my footsteps echoing off the stone walls. The interior of the lighthouse was sparse and dimly lit, the only source of illumination coming from the lantern room at the top of the tower. I made my way up the narrow staircase, each step creaking beneath my weight. The air grew colder with each passing moment, sending shivers down my spine as though I had wandered into the heart of a winter storm. As I reached the top of the tower, I found myself in the lantern room, the glass windows offering a panoramic view of the storm-tossed sea below. The beam of the lighthouse swept across the waves, cutting through the darkness like a sword, guiding ships safely to shore. But as I watched the swirling waters below, I caught sight of something moving in the shadows, a figure standing at the edge of the cliff, its form obscured by the mist. I blinked, and it was gone, leaving behind nothing but the sound of the wind whistling through the cracks in the walls. I shook my head, chiding myself for letting my imagination run wild. But as I turned to leave, I felt a cold hand close around my heart, squeezing with a grip that threatened to suffocate me. With a sense of growing dread, I realized that I was not alone in the lighthouse, that something was watching me from the darkness, waiting to claim me as its own. I tried to flee, but the door was stuck fast, as though held in place by some unseen force. Panic surged through me as I searched for a way out, my hands scrabbling against the cold stone walls in a desperate bid for escape. But no matter which way I turned, it seemed as though the darkness was closing in around me, trapping me in its suffocating embrace. And then, just as it seemed as though all hope was lost, I heard a voice echoing through the darkness, a voice from my past, calling out to me with a familiarity that filled me with both dread and relief. With a surge of adrenaline, I turned toward the sound, my heart pounding in my chest. And there, standing in the doorway, was the figure from the cliff, the one I had seen watching me from the shadows. But as it stepped into the light, I saw that it was not a stranger, but someone I had known long ago, a friend, lost to me in the mists of time. Relief flooded through me as I rushed forward to embrace them, my fears melting away like snow in the warmth of their presence. Together we fled from the lighthouse, the darkness receding behind us like a retreating tide. As we emerged into the light of day, I glanced back at the structure, a shiver running down my spine at the thought of the horrors that lay within. But even as we put distance between ourselves and the lighthouse, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness still lingered, waiting to claim its next victim. And though I knew we had escaped for now, I couldn't help but wonder what other horrors awaited those foolish enough to venture into its depths. Story 30. As we made our way down the rocky path from the lighthouse, the storm seemed to rage with renewed fury, the wind howling like a banshee and the waves crashing against the cliffs with a deafening roar. I clung to my friend's arm, grateful for their presence in the midst of the tempest. As we reached the bottom of the path, I glanced back at the lighthouse looming above us, its silhouette stark against the backdrop of the stormy sky. Despite the danger it posed, there was something mesmerizing about the way it stood against the elements, a solitary beacon in the darkness. But even as I admired its rugged beauty, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in the pit of my stomach. The memory of the figure I had seen watching me from the shadows haunted me like a ghost, its presence a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked within the lighthouse's walls. With a sense of urgency, we made our way back to town, the wind whipping at our backs as though urging us onward. The streets were deserted, the only signs of life the flickering streetlights that cast long shadows across the pavement. As we reached the safety of our homes, I turned to my friend, gratitude swelling in my chest like a tidal wave. "Thank you for saving me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what I would have done without you." My friend smiled, their eyes filled with a warmth that chased away the lingering chill of the storm. "We'll always look out for each other," they said, their voice strong and steady despite the tumultuous night we had endured. With a sense of relief, I bid my friend goodnight and retreated into the warmth of my home, the memory of the haunted lighthouse fading like a dream upon waking. But even as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness still lingered, waiting just beyond the edge of consciousness, ready to claim me as its next victim. Days turned into weeks, and the memory of the haunted lighthouse began to fade like the last vestiges of a passing storm. Life returned to normal, the streets bustling with activity once more, as though the events of that fateful night had never happened. But try as I might, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was not right, that the darkness that had haunted me in the lighthouse still lingered just beyond the edge of my perception. It was as though a shadow had been cast over the town, a darkness that refused to be dispelled by the light of day. As the weeks turned into months, strange things began to happen. Unexplained noises in the night, mysterious figures glimpsed in the shadows, a sense of unease that seemed to pervade every corner of the town. Rumors began to spread, whispered tales of a curse that had befallen the town, of a darkness that lurked just beneath the surface, waiting to claim its next victim. I tried to ignore the rumors, to convince myself that they were nothing more than the product of an overactive imagination. But as the days wore on and the strange occurrences grew more frequent, I couldn't help but wonder if there might be some truth to the stories after all. With a sense of determination, I set out to uncover the truth behind the curse that had befallen our town, to discover the source of the darkness that threatened to consume us all. And as I delved deeper into the mystery, I realized that the key to unlocking the town's secrets lay hidden within the walls of the haunted lighthouse, waiting to be discovered by those brave enough to seek it out. With a sense of purpose burning in my heart, I set out once more for the lighthouse, determined to confront the darkness that lurked within its depths. And as I stood before the weathered walls of the structure, I knew that whatever lay inside would test me in ways I could never have imagined. With a deep breath, I pushed open the door and stepped inside, the darkness enveloping me like a cloak. The air was thick with the scent of salt and seaweed, mingling with the faintest hint of decay. But despite the oppressive atmosphere, I pressed on, guided by a determination to uncover the truth at any cost. As I climbed the narrow staircase to the top of the tower, each step echoing in the silence, I felt a sense of dread settle over me like a shroud. The darkness seemed to press in from all sides, suffocating me with its malevolent presence. But even as fear threatened to consume me, I pressed on, driven by a sense of duty that burned like a beacon in the night. And as I reached the lantern room at the top of the tower, I knew that the answers I sought lay just beyond the threshold, waiting to be discovered by those brave enough to seek them out. With a trembling hand, I pushed open the door and stepped inside, the light from the beacon casting long shadows across the room. And there, standing before me in the center of the room, was the figure I had seen on that stormy night so long ago, the one who had saved me from the darkness that threatened to consume me. With a sense of recognition, I realized that the figure was not a stranger, but someone I had known long ago, a friend, lost to me in the mists of time. And as they turned to face me, their eyes filled with a sadness that mirrored my own, I knew that whatever lay ahead, we would face it together, bound by a bond that transcended the boundaries of time and space. With a sense of determination burning in my heart, I reached out to my friend, their hand warm in mine. And as we stood together in the darkness of the haunted lighthouse, I knew that no matter what trials lay ahead, we would face them as one, united in our quest to uncover the truth and banish the darkness that threatened to consume us all. Story 31. The enchanted forest loomed before me, its ancient trees standing tall and proud, their branches reaching toward the sky like gnarled fingers grasping for the heavens. As I stepped beneath the canopy, a sense of wonder washed over me, the air alive with the whispering of leaves and the songs of birds. But despite its beauty, there was something unsettling about the forest. something that sent shivers down my spine and made my heart race with fear. It was as though the very air itself was alive with a malevolent energy, watching my every move with a sense of foreboding. As I wandered deeper into the heart of the forest, the sunlight filtering through the branches above cast long shadows across the forest floor, creating an eerie tableau that seemed to shift and dance with each passing moment. The air grew thick with the scent of earth and decay, mingling with the faintest hint of something darker lurking just beyond the edge of perception. With each step, the feeling of being watched grew stronger, as though unseen eyes followed my every move with a sense of hunger and anticipation. I tried to shake off the feeling, to convince myself that it was nothing more than my imagination running wild, but the sense of unease lingered like a persistent fog. As I pushed deeper into the forest, the trees seemed to close in around me, their twisted branches forming a tangled maze that threatened to ensnare me in its grasp. The path ahead was shrouded in darkness, the sunlight unable to penetrate the dense canopy above. With a sense of trepidation, I pressed on, my heart pounding in my chest as though trying to escape the confines of my ribcage. But no matter which way I turned, it seemed as though the forest stretched out before me like an endless labyrinth, its secrets hidden behind a veil of shadows. Suddenly, I stumbled upon a clearing hidden deep within the heart of the forest, its center dominated by a gnarled oak tree that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly light. As I approached, the air grew thick with magic, the very ground beneath my feet tingling with its presence. With trembling hands, I reached out to touch the tree, feeling its ancient energy surge through me like a bolt of lightning. And then, with a sudden flash of light, the world around me shifted and changed, revealing a sight that filled me with wonder and terror in equal measure. The clearing was no longer empty, but filled with creatures of myth and legend, elves with skin as pale as moonlight, fairies with wings that glittered like jewels, and creatures that defied description, their forms twisting and shifting with each passing moment. But as I watched in awe, I realized that these creatures were not the benevolent beings of fairy tales, but something far darker and more sinister. Their eyes burned with a hunger that sent chill down my spine, their laughter echoing through the clearing like a death knell. With a sense of mounting dread, I turned to flee, but the creatures surrounded me, their forms shifting and changing with each passing moment. It was as though the forest itself had come alive, its very essence twisted and corrupted by the darkness that lurked within its depths. With each step, the ground seemed to shift beneath my feet, the trees reaching out to ensnare me in their grasp. I could feel the darkness closing in around me, its tendrils wrapping around my throat like a noose, choking off my air and suffocating me with its malevolent presence. But just as it seemed as though all hope was lost, I heard a voice echoing through the darkness, a voice from my past, calling out to me with a familiarity that filled me with both dread and relief. With a surge of adrenaline, I broke free from the grasp of the creatures and stumbled toward the source of the voice, my heart pounding in my chest. And then I saw them, my loved one, standing at the edge of the clearing, their eyes filled with fear and concern. Together we fled from the forest, the darkness receding behind us like a retreating tide. As we emerged into the light of day, I glanced back at the enchanted forest, a shiver running down my spine at the thought of the horrors that lay within. But even as we put distance between ourselves and the forest, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness still lingered, waiting to claim its next victim. And though I knew we had escaped for now, I couldn't help but wonder what other horrors awaited those foolish enough to venture into its depths. Story 32. The abandoned asylum loomed before me, its crumbling facade a testament to the horrors that had once lurked within its walls. As I approached, a chill wind swept through the overgrown courtyard, sending leaves swirling in its wake. The air was thick with the scent of decay, the silence broken only by the distant sound of creaking timbers and the occasional scuttling of unseen creatures. Despite the warning signs, I couldn't resist the pull of curiosity. With each step I took, the sense of foreboding grew stronger, like a weight pressing down on my chest, threatening to suffocate me. But still, I pressed on, determined to uncover the secrets that lay hidden within the abandoned asylum's walls. As I stepped inside, the darkness enveloped me like a shroud, the air heavy with dust and the musty scent of neglect. I fumbled for my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness like a knife as I explored the abandoned corridors. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet, the sound echoing through the empty halls like a mournful dirge. I could feel eyes watching me from the shadows, their gaze burning into my soul with a malevolent intensity. I pushed on, my heart pounding in my chest as I searched for some clue to the asylum's dark past. But the deeper I delved, the more it seemed as though the building itself was alive, its walls whispering secrets that I could not comprehend. Suddenly, I stumbled upon a staircase hidden behind a crumbling wall, its steps leading down into the depths of the earth. With a sense of trepidation, I descended into the darkness, the air growing colder with each passing moment. As I reached the bottom, I found myself in a vast chamber, its walls adorned with strange symbols and sigils. The air was heavy with the scent of blood, the stench clinging to my clothes like a foul miasma. I moved deeper into the chamber, my footsteps echoing off the stone walls like the tolling of a funeral bell. And then, I saw a figure standing in the center of the room, its features obscured by the shadows. I froze, my breath catching in my throat as I watched the figure approach, its movements slow and deliberate. As it drew nearer, I could see that it was not human, but something far more sinister, a creature of darkness and despair, its eyes burning with an otherworldly light. I tried to flee, but my legs refused to move, as though rooted to the spot by some unseen force. The creature reached out a hand, its fingers elongated and skeletal, and I felt a cold dread wash over me like a tidal wave. But just as it seemed as though all hope was lost, a voice echoed through the darkness, a voice from my past, calling out to me with a familiarity that filled me with both dread and relief. With a surge of adrenaline, I broke free from the creature's grasp and stumbled toward the source of the voice, my heart pounding in my chest. And then I saw them, my loved one, standing at the entrance to the chamber, their face pale and drawn with fear. Together we fled from the asylum, the darkness receding behind us like a retreating tide. As we emerged into the light of day, I glanced back at the abandoned building, a shiver running down my spine at the thought of the horrors that lay within. But even as we put distance between ourselves and the asylum, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness still lingered, waiting to claim its next victim. And though I knew we had escaped for now, I couldn't help but wonder what other horrors awaited those foolish enough to venture into its depths. Story 33. The forgotten mine lay hidden deep within the heart of the forest, its entrance obscured by dense undergrowth and tangled vines. As I approached, a sense of unease settled over me, the air heavy with the scent of earth and decay. I pushed my way through the underbrush and stepped inside, the darkness enveloping me like a cloak. The air was thick with dust and the faint echo of distant footsteps, as though the mine itself were alive with a sense of anticipation. I moved deeper into the mine, the walls closing in around me like the jaws of a predator. The floor was uneven beneath my feet, the sound of my footsteps echoing off the walls like a mournful dirge. As I reached the heart of the mine, I stumbled upon a chamber hidden deep within its depths, its walls adorned with strange symbols and sigils. The air grew thick with the scent of sulfur, the very ground beneath my feet trembling with the weight of the unknown. With a sense of trepidation, I moved deeper into the chamber, my heart pounding in my chest as though trying to escape the confines of my ribcage. And then I saw a figure standing at the far end of the room, its features obscured by the shadows. I froze, my breath catching in my throat as I watched the figure approach, its movements slow and deliberate. As it drew nearer, I could see that it was not human, but something far more sinister, a creature of darkness and despair, its eyes burning with an otherworldly light. I tried to flee, but my legs refused to move, as though rooted to the spot by some unseen force. The creature reached out a hand, its fingers elongated and skeletal, and I felt a cold dread wash over me like a tidal wave. But just as it seemed as though all hope was lost, a voice echoed through the darkness, a voice from my past, calling out to me with a familiarity that filled me with both dread and relief. With a surge of adrenaline, I broke free from the creature's grasp and stumbled toward the source of the voice, my heart pounding in my chest. And then I saw my loved one, standing at the entrance to the chamber, their face pale and drawn with fear. Together we fled from the forgotten mine, the darkness receding behind us like a retreating tide. As we emerged into the light of day, I glanced back at the abandoned entrance, a shiver running down my spine at the thought of the horrors that lay within. As we emerged from the forgotten mine, the air felt fresher, as if we had escaped the suffocating grasp of the darkness that had threatened to consume us. Yet, despite the relief flooding through me, a lingering sense of unease persisted, as though the mine's malevolent presence still lingered in the shadows. With each step away from the mine, the weight on my shoulders seemed to lift, replaced by a sense of liberation. Yet, the memory of the creature's haunting gaze and the oppressive atmosphere of the chamber remained etched in my mind like a nightmare I couldn't shake off. As we made our way back through the forest, the trees whispered secrets that I couldn't decipher, their rustling leaves a constant reminder of the mysteries that still lurked in the depths of the woods. I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder every few moments, half expecting to see the creature lurking in the shadows, its eyes burning with malice. When we finally emerged from the forest, the sight of the sun shining overhead filled me with a sense of relief. The warmth on my skin chased away the last remnants of the chill that had settled in my bones during our ordeal in the mine. But even as we returned to the safety of civilization, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness still lingered, waiting for its next opportunity to strike. The memory of the forgotten mine haunted me like a ghost, its secrets buried deep beneath the earth, waiting to be uncovered by the unwary. As we walked back to town, I couldn't help but wonder what other horrors lay hidden in the shadows, waiting to be unleashed upon the unsuspecting. And though I knew we had escaped with our lives, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness still lurked just beyond the edge of perception, waiting for its chance to strike once more. Story 34. The abandoned mansion stood at the end of the winding road, its once grand facade now weathered and worn by the passage of time. As I approached, a sense of foreboding settled over me, the air heavy with the scent of decay and neglect. The wrought iron gates creaked open, as if welcoming me into its eerie embrace, and I hesitantly stepped through, my footsteps echoing off the cobblestone path. The mansion loomed before me, its towering spires reaching toward the sky like fingers grasping for the heavens. I pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped inside, the air thick with dust and the faint echo of distant footsteps. The grand foyer stretched out before me, its marble floors cracked and worn, its once grand chandeliers covered in cobwebs. As I explored the abandoned mansion, each room seemed to hold its own secrets, its own whispered tales of the past. The walls were adorned with faded tapestries and crumbling portraits, their subjects staring out at me with hollow eyes. In the grand ballroom, the echoes of long-forgotten music seemed to linger in the air, the sound of laughter and conversation echoing through the empty halls. But now, the room was silent, the only sound the mournful wail of the wind outside. I made my way up the grand staircase, the wood groaning beneath my weight as though protesting the intrusion. The air grew colder with each step, sending shivers down my spine as though warning me to turn back. But still, I pressed on, driven by a curiosity that bordered on obsession. As I reached the top of the staircase, I found myself in a long hallway lined with closed doors, their surfaces covered in layers of dust and grime. I pushed open one of the doors and stepped inside, the room shrouded in darkness save for the faint glow of moonlight filtering through the curtains. The air was heavy with the scent of mildew, the sound of dripping water echoing off the walls. I moved deeper into the room, my footsteps echoing off the wooden floors like the tolling of a funeral bell. And then, I saw a figure standing in the corner, its features obscured by the shadows. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest as I watched the figure approach, its movements slow and deliberate. As it drew nearer, I could see that it was not human, but something far more sinister, a creature of darkness and despair, its eyes burning with an otherworldly light. I tried to flee, but my legs refused to move, as though rooted to the spot by some unseen force. The creature reached out a hand, its fingers elongated and skeletal, and I felt a cold dread wash over me like a tidal wave. But just as it seemed as though all hope was lost, a voice echoed through the darkness, a voice from my past, calling out to me with a familiarity that filled me with both dread and relief. With a surge of adrenaline, I broke free from the creature's grasp and stumbled toward the source of the voice, my heart pounding in my chest. And then, I saw them, my loved one, standing in the doorway, their face pale and drawn with fear. Together we fled from the abandoned mansion, the darkness receding behind us like a retreating tide. As we emerged into the light of day, I glanced back at the crumbling facade, a shiver running down my spine at the thought of the horrors that lay within. As we hurried away from the abandoned mansion, the memory of its haunting corridors and shadowy figures lingered in my mind like a ghostly echo. Each step we took felt like a release from the suffocating grasp of the darkness that had threatened to consume us within its decaying walls. Yet, despite our escape, a lingering sense of unease gnawed at my insides, as if the mansion's malevolent presence still lingered in the air around us. The image of the creature's twisted form haunted my thoughts, its baleful gaze etched into my memory like a nightmare I couldn't shake off. The sunlight streaming through the trees seemed to offer a reprieve from the gloom that had enveloped us in the mansion, its warmth a comforting reminder of the world beyond the shadows. But even in the light of day, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, as though unseen eyes followed our every move with a sense of anticipation. As we made our way back to town, the sounds of life surrounded us once more, the bustling streets and cheerful chatter a stark contrast to the silence that had filled the abandoned mansion. Yet beneath the facade of normalcy, I couldn't help but feel that something was amiss, as though the darkness that had lurked in the mansion's halls had followed us back into the world. With each passing moment, the memory of our ordeal grew fainter, overshadowed by the distractions of everyday life. But try as I might, I couldn't shake the feeling that the mansion's secrets still lingered, waiting to be uncovered by those brave enough to venture into its depths. And though I prayed that no one else would fall victim to its malevolent influence, I couldn't help but wonder what other horrors awaited those who dared to explore its haunted halls. For in the heart of the abandoned mansion, a darkness lurked that defied explanation, a darkness that hungered for souls and would stop at nothing to claim its next victim. Story 35. The whispering woods stretched out before me like a sea of green, their ancient trees towering overhead like silent sentinels guarding secrets lost to time. As I stepped beneath the canopy, a sense of unease settled over me, the air alive with the whispering of leaves and the faint echo of distant footsteps. The forest seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, its very essence tingling against my skin like a faint electric current. I hesitated for a moment, the weight of the unknown pressing down on me like a heavy cloak, before steeling myself and pressing forward into the heart of the woods. As I wandered deeper into the forest, The sunlight filtering through the branches above cast dappled patterns of light and shadow across the forest floor. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, mingling with the faintest hint of something darker lurking just beyond the edge of perception. With each step, the feeling of being watched grew stronger, as though unseen eyes followed my every move with a sense of hunger and anticipation. I tried to shake off the feeling, to convince myself that it was nothing more than my imagination running wild, but the sense of unease lingered like a persistent fog. As I pushed deeper into the woods, the trees seemed to close in around me, their twisted branches forming a tangled maze that threatened to ensnare me in its grasp. The path ahead was shrouded in darkness, the sunlight unable to penetrate the dense canopy above. But still I pressed on, driven by a sense of curiosity that bordered on obsession. The woods seemed to stretch on endlessly, each turn leading me deeper into the heart of the forest and further from the safety of civilization. Suddenly I stumbled upon a clearing hidden deep within the woods, its center dominated by a cluster of ancient standing stones. The air grew thick with the scent of magic, the very ground beneath my feet tingling with its presence. With a sense of trepidation, I approached the stones, their weathered surfaces adorned with strange symbols and sigils. As I reached out to touch them, a surge of energy coursed through me, filling me with a sense of power and purpose. But even as I reveled in the sensation, a voice echoed through the clearing, a voice from my past, calling out to me with a familiarity that filled me with both dread and relief. With a surge of adrenaline, I turned to see my loved ones standing at the edge of the clearing, their eyes wide with fear and concern. Together we fled from the whispering woods, the darkness receding behind us like a retreating tide. As we emerged into the light of day, I glanced back at the forest, a shiver running down my spine at the thought of the horrors that lay within. But even as we put distance between ourselves and the woods, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness still lingered, waiting to claim its next victim. And though I knew we had escaped for now, I couldn't help but wonder what other horrors awaited those foolish enough to venture into its depths. For in the heart of the whispering woods, secrets lay buried, waiting to be uncovered by those brave enough to seek them out. Story 36. The Carnival of Souls arrived in our town on a moonless night, its arrival shrouded in mystery and darkness. As I approached the outskirts of the carnival grounds, a chill wind swept through the air, carrying with it the faint scent of cotton candy and popcorn mingled with something more sinister. The carnival's attractions loomed before me like twisted specters rising from the shadows, rickety rides that groaned and creaked in the breeze, faded tents with tattered banners fluttering in the night, and stalls selling trinkets that glimmered in the dim light. Despite the ominous atmosphere, a sense of curiosity tugged at me, drawing me closer to the flickering lights and the distant strains of carnival music. With each step, the air seemed to grow thicker, as though the very fabric of reality was stretched thin within the carnival's boundaries. As I ventured deeper into the carnival grounds, the darkness seemed to press in around me, suffocating and oppressive. The air was alive with the whispers of unseen specters, their voices echoing through the night like the wails of lost souls. I moved through the carnival with a sense of trepidation, each attraction more unsettling than the last. The funhouse loomed before me like a twisted labyrinth, its mirrored halls reflecting distorted images of my own fear-stricken face. But even as I hesitated at the entrance, a voice called out to me from within, the voice of a loved one, beckoning me to brave the darkness and uncover the truth that lay hidden within the funhouse's halls. With a sense of determination burning in my heart, I stepped inside, the darkness swallowing me whole as the door closed behind me. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and decay, the sound of distant laughter echoing through the halls like a mocking taunt. I moved through the funhouse with cautious steps, my heart pounding in my chest with each twist and turn. The mirrors seemed to distort reality, twisting my reflection into grotesque caricatures that danced and mocked me as I passed. As I reached the heart of the funhouse, I stumbled upon a chamber hidden deep within its depths, a chamber adorned with strange symbols and sigils, its walls pulsing with an otherworldly energy. With a sense of trepidation, I approached the center of the chamber, where a single crystal orb glimmered with an ethereal light. As I reached out to touch it, a surge of power coursed through me, filling me with a sense of purpose and determination. But even as I reveled in the sensation, a voice echoed through the chamber, a voice from my past, calling out to me with a familiarity that filled me with both dread and relief. With a surge of adrenaline, I turned to see my loved one standing at the entrance to the chamber, their eyes wide with fear and concern. Together we fled from the funhouse, the darkness receding behind us like a retreating tide. As we emerged into the light of day, I glanced back at the carnival grounds, a shiver running down my spine at the thought of the horrors that lay within. But even as we put distance between ourselves and the carnival, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness still lingered, waiting to claim its next victim. And though I knew we had escaped for now, I couldn't help but wonder what other horrors awaited those foolish enough to venture into its depths. For in the heart of the carnival of souls, secrets lay buried, waiting to be uncovered by those brave enough to seek them out. As we hurried away from the carnival of souls, the memory of its eerie attractions and unsettling atmosphere lingered in my mind like a haunting melody. Each step we took felt like a release from the suffocating grip of the darkness that had threatened to ensnare us within its twisted confines. Yet, despite our escape, a lingering sense of unease gnawed at my insides, as if the carnival's malevolent presence still loomed over us. The echoes of distant laughter and whispered secrets seemed to follow us, as though the spirits of the carnival were reluctant to let us go. The moon cast long shadows across the empty streets as we made our way back home, the air heavy with the weight of the unknown. I couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister lurked just beyond the edge of perception, waiting for its chance to strike. As we reached the safety of our own doorstep, I breathed a sigh of relief, the warmth of home a comforting refuge from the terrors of the night. But even as I stepped inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness still lingered, waiting for its next opportunity to claim its victims. Story 37. The haunted lighthouse stood tall and solitary against the backdrop of the stormy sea, its weathered exterior bearing the scars of countless years battling the elements. As I approached, the wind howled around me, carrying with it the salty tang of the ocean and the distant cries of seabirds. The lighthouse loomed before me like a sentinel of the night, its beacon extinguished and its windows dark. Yet, despite its ominous appearance, a sense of curiosity drew me closer, the allure of its whispered secrets too powerful to resist. With each step, the ground beneath my feet grew more treacherous, the rocks slick with seawater and the path steep and unforgiving. But still, I pressed on, my determination outweighing the fear that gnawed at my insides. As I reached the base of the lighthouse, a sense of foreboding settled over me, the air thick with the weight of the unknown. The door stood slightly ajar, inviting me to step inside and uncover the mysteries that lay hidden within. With a trembling hand, I pushed open the door and stepped inside, the darkness enveloping me like a shroud. The air was heavy with the scent of salt and decay, the sound of the waves crashing against the rocks outside echoing through the empty halls. I moved deeper into the lighthouse, each step echoing off the walls like a mournful dirge. The staircase spiraled upward, disappearing into the darkness above, beckoning me to follow its winding path to the top. As I ascended, the air grew colder with each passing moment, sending shivers down my spine as though warning me to turn back. But still, I pressed on, my curiosity driving me ever forward. As I reached the top of the staircase, I found myself in the lantern room, its windows offering a panoramic view of the storm-tossed sea below. The beacon lay dormant, its light extinguished and its machinery silent. But even as I gazed out at the raging sea, a movement caught my eye, a shadowy figure standing at the edge of the cliff, its form obscured by the driving rain. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest as I watched the figure approach, its movements slow and deliberate. As it drew nearer, I could see that it was not human, but something far more sinister, a ghostly apparition with hollow eyes that glowed with an otherworldly light. I tried to flee, but my legs refused to move, as though rooted to the spot by some unseen force. The apparition reached out a hand, its fingers elongated and skeletal, and I felt a cold dread wash over me like a tidal wave. But just as it seemed as though all hope was lost, a voice echoed through the darkness, a voice from my past, calling out to me with a familiarity that filled me with both dread and relief. With a surge of adrenaline, I broke free from the apparition's grasp and stumbled toward the source of the voice, my heart pounding in my chest. And there, standing in the doorway, was my loved one, their eyes wide with fear and concern. Together we fled from the haunted lighthouse, the darkness receding behind us like a retreating tide. As we emerged into the light of day, I glanced back at the towering structure, a shiver running down my spine at the thought of the horrors that lay within. As we fled from the haunted lighthouse, the storm raged on around us, the wind whipping at our backs and the rain soaking us to the bone. Each step felt like a race against time, as though the darkness that had threatened to consume us within the lighthouse was hot on our heels, eager to reclaim its lost prey. The sound of crashing waves filled the air, their roar drowning out all other noise as we made our way back to the safety of solid ground. The rocks beneath our feet were slick with seawater, threatening to send us tumbling into the churning sea below with each precarious step. But despite the danger, we pressed on, driven by a primal instinct to escape the horrors that lurked in the darkness behind us. The lighthouse loomed in the distance like a spectral apparition, its silhouette etched against the stormy sky like a grim omen of what lay in wait for those foolish enough to approach. As we reached the safety of the shoreline, a sense of relief washed over me, the pounding of my heart gradually slowing to a more manageable rhythm. Yet, even as we caught our breath, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness still lingered, waiting for its next opportunity to strike. The storm raged on around us, the sky a tempest of swirling clouds and flashes of lightning that illuminated the landscape with an eerie, otherworldly light. In the distance, the lighthouse stood silent and foreboding, its dark form a stark contrast against the backdrop of the storm. I glanced back at the lighthouse, a shiver running down my spine at the thought of the horrors that lay within its walls. But even as I turned away, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness still watched us, its malevolent gaze following our every move with a sense of hungry anticipation. As we made our way back to town, the storm gradually began to subside, the wind dying down and the rain easing to a gentle drizzle. Yet, despite the calming of the elements, the memory of our ordeal in the haunted lighthouse continued to haunt me, like a specter that refused to be banished from my thoughts. And though I prayed that no one else would fall victim to its sinister influence, I couldn't help but wonder what other horrors lay hidden in the darkness, waiting to be uncovered by those foolish enough to seek them out. For in the heart of the haunted lighthouse, secrets lay buried, waiting to be unearthed by those brave enough to venture into its depths. Story 38. The desolate farmhouse stood at the edge of the abandoned fields, its once vibrant paint now faded and peeling, its windows shattered and empty. As I approached, a chill wind swept through the overgrown grass, carrying with it the faint scent of decay and neglect. The farmhouse loomed before me like a forgotten relic of a bygone era, its weathered boards groaning in protest as if they held untold secrets within their ancient walls. Despite the warning signs of danger, a sense of curiosity drew me closer, my footsteps echoing off the barren landscape. With each step, the air grew heavier, as though weighed down by the weight of the farmhouse's tragic history. The fields lay fallow and forgotten, the remnants of crops long since withered and decayed, their ghostly shapes swaying in the breeze like specters in the night. As I approached the farmhouse door, the wood splintered and weathered. I hesitated for a moment, the fear of the unknown gripping me like a vice. But still, I pressed on, driven by a determination to uncover the mysteries that lay hidden within. With a trembling hand, I pushed open the door and stepped inside, the darkness enveloping me like a shroud. The air was thick with dust and the faint echo of distant footsteps, as though the farmhouse itself held its breath in anticipation. I moved deeper into the farmhouse, my footsteps echoing off the empty walls like a mournful dirge. The floorboards creaked beneath my weight, the sound echoing through the silent halls like a whispered secret. As I explored the abandoned rooms, each one seemed to hold its own tragic tale, a faded photograph here, a broken piece of furniture there, each one a silent witness to the passage of time. The air was heavy with the scent of decay, the musty odor clinging to my clothes like a shroud. I reached the staircase and began to ascend, each step groaning beneath my weight as though protesting the intrusion. The air grew colder with each passing moment, sending shivers down my spine as though warning me to turn back. But still I pressed on, my curiosity driving me ever forward. As I reached the top of the staircase, I found myself in a long hallway lined with closed doors, their surfaces covered in layers of dust and grime. I pushed open one of the doors and stepped inside, the room shrouded in darkness save for the faint glow of moonlight filtering through the curtains. The air was heavy with the scent of decay, the sound of dripping water echoing off the walls. I moved deeper into the room, my footsteps echoing off the wooden floors like the tolling of a funeral bell. And then I saw a figure standing in the corner, its features obscured by the shadows. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest as I watched the figure approach, its movements slow and deliberate. As it drew nearer, I could see that it was not human, but something far more sinister, a creature of darkness and despair, its eyes burning with an otherworldly light. I tried to flee, but my legs refused to move, as though rooted to the spot by some unseen force. The creature reached out a hand, its fingers elongated and skeletal, and I felt a cold dread wash over me like a tidal wave. But just as it seemed as though all hope was lost, a voice echoed through the darkness, a voice from my past, calling out to me with a familiarity that filled me with both dread and relief. With a surge of adrenaline, I broke free from the creature's grasp and stumbled toward the source of the voice, my heart pounding in my chest. And there, standing in the doorway, was my loved one, their face pale and drawn with fear. Together we fled from the desolate farmhouse, the darkness receding behind us like a retreating tide. As we emerged into the light of day, I glanced back at the abandoned building, a shiver running down my spine at the thought of the horrors that lay within. As we fled from the desolate farmhouse, the memory of its eerie atmosphere and unsettling presence lingered in my mind like a persistent shadow. The wind continued to howl around us, carrying with it the echoes of distant whispers that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the abandoned building. Each step we took felt like a reprieve from the oppressive weight of the darkness that had threatened to engulf us within its decaying walls. Yet, despite our escape, a sense of unease lingered, like a faint echo that refused to fade away. The fields surrounding the farmhouse stretched out before us, barren and desolate, as though they too bore witness to the tragedies that had unfolded within the crumbling structure. The rustling of the dry grass seemed to whisper secrets of the past, their voices a haunting reminder of the darkness that had once claimed this place as its own. As we made our way back to civilization, the distant lights of town seemed to offer a beacon of hope in the darkness, a reminder that there was still light to be found even in the darkest of places. Yet, Despite the comforting glow of civilization, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness still lingered, waiting for its next opportunity to strike. The memory of the desolate farmhouse haunted my dreams that night, its crumbling walls and shadowy corridors twisting and morphing into grotesque shapes that filled me with a sense of dread. But even as I tossed and turned in my sleep, I couldn't escape the feeling that there was still more to uncover, more secrets waiting to be unearthed in the darkness. And though I prayed that no one else would fall victim to the malevolent presence that lurked within the farmhouse, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness was not yet finished with us. For in the heart of the desolate farmhouse, mysteries lay buried, waiting to be uncovered by those brave enough to seek them out. Story 39. The forgotten asylum stood on the outskirts of town, its crumbling facade a dim testament to the passage of time and the horrors that had unfolded within its walls. As I approached, a sense of foreboding settled over me, the air heavy with the scent of decay and despair. The asylum loomed before me like a shadow from a nightmare, its windows broken and its doors hanging off their hinges. Despite the warning signs, a morbid curiosity drew me closer, the allure of its whispered secrets too potent to resist. With each step, the air grew colder, as though the very essence of the asylum sucked the warmth from the world around it. The wind whispered through the empty halls, carrying with it the faint echoes of tortured screams and anguished cries. As I stepped through the broken entrance, the darkness enveloped me like a shroud, the air thick with dust and the faint scent of decay. I moved deeper into the asylum, the sound of my footsteps echoing off the crumbling walls like a mournful dirge. The asylum seemed to stretch on endlessly, its corridors twisting and turning like a labyrinth of despair. Each room held its own tragic tale, a rusted wheelchair in one corner, a tattered straitjacket in another, each one a silent witness to the suffering that had taken place within these walls. As I explored the abandoned rooms, the darkness seemed to press in around me, suffocating and oppressive. The air grew thick with the scent of mildew and decay, the musty odor clinging to my clothes like a second skin. I reached the staircase and began to ascend, each step groaning beneath my weight as though protesting the intrusion. The air grew colder with each passing moment, sending shivers down my spine as though warning me to turn back. But still, I pressed on, driven by a determination to uncover the mysteries that lay hidden within the asylum's decaying halls. As I reached the top of the staircase, I found myself in a long hallway lined with closed doors, their surfaces covered in layers of dust and grime. I pushed open one of the doors and stepped inside, the room shrouded in darkness, save for the faint glow of moonlight filtering through the broken windows. The air was heavy with the scent of decay, the sound of dripping water echoing off the walls. I moved deeper into the room, my footsteps echoing off the wooden floors like the tolling of a funeral bell. And then, I saw a figure standing in the corner, its features obscured by the shadows. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest as I watched the figure approach, its movements slow and deliberate. As it drew nearer, I could see that it was not human, but something far more sinister, a ghostly apparition with hollow eyes that glowed with an otherworldly light. I tried to flee, but my legs refused to move, as though rooted to the spot by some unseen force. The apparition reached out a hand, its fingers elongated and skeletal, and I felt a cold dread wash over me like a tidal wave. But just as it seemed as though all hope was lost, a voice echoed through the darkness, a voice from my past, calling out to me with a familiarity that filled me with both dread and relief. With a surge of adrenaline, I broke free from the apparition's grasp and stumbled toward the source of the voice, my heart pounding in my chest. And there, standing in the doorway, was my loved one, their face pale and drawn with fear. As we fled from the forgotten asylum, The memories of its haunted corridors and chilling atmosphere remained etched in my mind like scars that refused to fade. The weight of the darkness we had left behind pressed heavily upon us, a reminder of the horrors that lurked within the crumbling walls. The wind carried the whispers of the asylum's tortured past, a haunting melody that seemed to echo in the recesses of my mind long after we had escaped its clutches. Each gust felt like a spectral hand reaching out to drag us back into the depths of despair. Despite the relief of leaving the asylum behind, a sense of unease lingered, like a shadow that refused to be dispelled by the light of day. The image of the ghostly apparition haunted my thoughts, its hollow eyes burning with an otherworldly light that seemed to pierce through the darkness of my nightmares. As we made our way back to civilization, the world around us seemed to come alive with a renewed sense of vitality, the vibrant colors and sounds of life a stark contrast to the desolation we had left behind. Yet, even amidst the bustle of everyday life, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, as though the darkness that had claimed the asylum still lingered nearby. The memory of our ordeal in the forgotten asylum weighed heavily on my soul, its chilling presence seeping into every corner of my being like a poison that refused to be purged. But even as I struggled to come to terms with what had transpired, I couldn't escape the feeling that there was still more to uncover, more secrets waiting to be unearthed in the darkness. And though I prayed that no one else would fall victim to the malevolent forces that lurked within the asylum's decaying halls, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness was not yet finished with us. For in the heart of the forgotten asylum, mysteries lay buried, waiting to be uncovered by those brave enough to seek them out. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the memory of our escape from the asylum began to fade, overshadowed by the distractions of everyday life. Yet, even as I tried to move on, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness still lingered, waiting for its next opportunity to strike. And though I knew we had escaped for now, I couldn't help but wonder what other horrors awaited those foolish enough to venture into its depths. For in the heart of the forgotten asylum, secrets lay buried, waiting to be unearthed by those brave enough to seek them out. Story 40. I always believed horror was something you watched in movies or read in books, never something you'd live through. Yet, as I stand before the silent house at the end of Willow Street, the realization of my new reality sets in. This isn't just a story, it's my life now. Moving into the house was supposed to be a fresh start. After months of searching, this place appeared like a hidden gem tucked away from the bustle of the city. The rent was surprisingly affordable for such a spacious property. A steal, the landlord had called it with a chuckle that now, in hindsight, seemed more nervous than humorous. The first few nights were peaceful, almost serene. But then, the oddities began. It started with the feeling of being watched. You might think it's just the adjustment phase, getting used to the creaks and groans of an old house. But this was different. The air felt heavier in certain rooms, charged with an unspoken tension. I brushed off these feelings until the photographs started to change. Family pictures I had hung around the house began to warp subtly. Smiles would turn to smirks, and eyes seemed to follow me as I moved. I thought I was going mad, seeing things that weren't there. But when a friend visited and abruptly left, claiming they felt unwelcome, I knew it wasn't just my imagination. One evening, the tension escalated. I was reading in the living room when a cold draft swept through, extinguishing the candles I had lit. The room plunged into darkness, and the silence became oppressive, almost tangible. Then, from the hallway, I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps on the wooden floorboards, coming closer. I called out, thinking, hoping it was a friend playing a prank. But the only response was the continuing advance of those heavy, unseen steps. In a panic, I grabbed my phone, the screen's glow offering a meager shield against the encroaching darkness. The footsteps stopped just outside the living room, at the edge of the light's reach. My heart pounded in my chest, my breath shallow and rapid. Then, as suddenly as they had begun, the footsteps retreated, fading back into the silent house. The following day, I sought answers. The local library held decades of the town's history, and within it the dark tale of my home. Decades ago, the house on Willow Street was the site of a tragedy. A family, torn apart by jealousy and anger, met their end within its walls. The details were murky, the truth lost to time, but the outcome was clear: no one emerged alive. I realized then that the house held onto the echoes of its past, replaying its agony in a loop. The feeling of being watched, the changing photographs, the footsteps, all manifestations of its unresolved torment. Determined to break this cycle, I reached out to the descendants of the family, learning of a long-held desire to reconcile with the past. Together we organized a ceremony, a chance to acknowledge the pain and offer peace to those still clinging to the house. The night of the ceremony was unlike any other. As we gathered, lighting candles in a circle around the living room, the air shifted. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, watching our every move. We spoke words of forgiveness, of release, inviting those bound to the house to move on. And then the atmosphere changed. The heaviness lifted, replaced by a sense of tranquility. The candles flickered once, brightly, before settling. As we concluded, the house felt different, no longer a prison of its past, but just a house, silent and peaceful. I still live here, in the house on Willow Street. The oddities have ceased. The shadows no longer whisper with unrest. It's just a house now, but it taught me that horror isn't always supernatural. Sometimes it's the unresolved sorrows of the past, echoing through time. But like any story, with understanding and courage, even the darkest of tales can find a resolution. Story 41. I started to notice the beauty of life's simpler aspects. The sunlight seemed brighter as it streamed through the windows, casting warm, golden hues across the floors. The garden, which I had neglected, began to thrive, a symbol of the house's rejuvenation. Birds visited frequently, their songs a melody to mornings once filled with oppressive silence. It was as if nature itself was acknowledging the shift, celebrating the release of the house's long-held sorrow. But the most profound change was within me. Living in the house, confronting its past, and facilitating a resolution taught me about resilience and the power of facing one's fears. I had walked into this situation seeking a new beginning, unaware that I would become part of something much larger than myself, a healing process not only for the spirits trapped by past tragedies, but for my own spirit as well. In time, I shared the story of the house with others. Some were skeptical, of course, but many felt moved by the transformation. The house on Willow Street became somewhat of a local legend, a testament to the idea that even places marked by darkness can find light again. People started to view it not as a site of horror, but as a beacon of hope, a reminder that healing is possible with empathy and action. As I sit here now, reflecting on the journey, I realize that the true horror was never about ghosts or inexplicable phenomena. It was about the echoes of pain that go unaddressed, the unresolved tensions that we too might carry within us. The house taught me that addressing these shadows is not just about confronting fear, it's about understanding the depths of our own humanity and our capacity for forgiveness, growth, and ultimately peace. Story 42. My story begins on a late autumn evening, driving back from a conference through the dense forests of the Northwest. The road was infamous for its lack of service stations and the thick fog that descended without warning, cloaking everything in a disorienting mist. I've always prided myself on being rational, a skeptic of the supernatural and dismissive of the stories that often circulated about this stretch of highway. But that night my beliefs were challenged, not by ghosts or ghouls, but by the very essence of fear and isolation. The fog rolled in like a living entity, reducing my world to the few meters illuminated by my headlights. The dense trees on either side appeared as specters, moving in and out of visibility. Despite the eerie setting, my initial concern was practical, keeping my car on the road and making it home safely. But as the night deepened, so did the sense of unease. I remember glancing at the clock and noticing it was just past midnight when my car sputtered unexpectedly and died, leaving me stranded in an ocean of fog and darkness. Panic surged as I tried to restart the engine, to no avail. My phone predictably had no signal. I was utterly alone, miles from anywhere, enveloped in a silence so thick it felt like a weight upon my chest. With no other option, I decided to wait until dawn or for another vehicle to pass by. I locked the doors and settled into my seat, trying to stay calm. The hours crept by, marked only by the slow movement of the moon through the fog above. Then, something changed. The silence was broken by the sound of footsteps outside, deliberate and measured, circling the car. I strained my eyes against the darkness, but could see nothing. The footsteps stopped, and then, without warning, a tapping against the window. I froze, every instinct screaming that this was wrong, impossible, because there was nothing and no one for miles. The tapping persisted, rhythmic and insistent, a stark contrast to the oppressive silence that had enveloped me. My heart raced as I debated whether to confront the unseen visitor or remain hidden in the shadows of my car. The rational part of my brain suggested it could be a stranded motorist, another soul lost in this forsaken stretch of wilderness. But the timing, the sudden appearance out of nowhere, it all felt too coincidental, too sinister. As the tapping continued, a sense of dread grew within me, its roots burrowing deep into my psyche, threatening to overwhelm my composure. Despite my fear, curiosity and a desperate need for human contact in this desolate place nudged me towards action. With a shaky hand, I reached for the car's flashlight, my fingers fumbling in the dark. The moment the light pierced the fog, the tapping ceased. The silence returned, more oppressive than before, as if the very atmosphere was holding its breath. I scanned the dense mist, the flashlight revealing nothing but the immediate vicinity, a small island of light in an endless sea of darkness. The sudden quiet was unnerving. I wondered if I had imagined the sounds, a trick of the mind induced by fear and isolation. But then, as suddenly as it had stopped, the tapping resumed, this time on the opposite window. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead as I realized this was no mere coincidence. The deliberate movement, the knowing pauses, it was as if whatever was out there was playing a game, toying with me. I mustered the courage to crack the window open, the cold night air carrying the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves. "Hello," I called out, my voice barely a whisper, lost in the fog. No answer came, only the sound of my own breathing, ragged and loud in the silence. As dawn approached, the fog began to lift, revealing the gnarled shapes of trees and the road stretching emptily in both directions. The sense of presence, so overwhelming during the night, faded with the darkness, leaving me to wonder if the fear had conjured phantoms from the fog. Yet the relief of morning light did little to ease the chill of dread that lingered, a reminder of the night when my beliefs were tested, not by the supernatural, but by the primal fear of the unknown, alone on that fog-enshrouded road.